Welcome, everyone, to another BRAP. It is Wednesday night. I was going to say it's the last day of February, but it's not. We have the 29th tomorrow. And with that, we have another major release coming. But I want to go ahead and introduce the panel here quickly. Hopefully, B Money can join us. I know B's been kind of in and out here with, I think he's having some issues with Discord. But I do have with me, and his timing's perfect, by the way, all the way from the other side of planet Earth, we have Falky, David Faulkner, with us. What's up, Falky? How are you, man?
Going well, mate. We made it to Thursday. The world continues to be sunshine and rainbows, or doom and gloom, depending on your perspective. But at least we made it.
Yeah, we did make it. We did, and you know, Falky, your timing here. I know we've been discussing behind the scenes getting you back on BRAP, and I know it just really hasn't worked out with your schedule, but this actually worked out perfectly because there's a lot of stuff going on right now in the gaming industry. We're going to talk about some of the reactions that we're seeing from consumers about a lot of the layoffs. We got more layoffs announced today, unfortunately, with a big publisher, which we'll discuss. Obviously, we know about the Sony layoffs, which we'll discuss as well. We'll get into some of the conversation around the strategy and what people are speculating Sony might do. I'm not. We're going to talk about this idea of them going day and date. I know some people are convinced that is in fact going to happen, but we'll discuss that because it's not as easy as flipping the switch as some people might think. You know, just more games everywhere might not be good for them per se, but and then we'll talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which comes out tomorrow. Actually releases at midnight. Well, Falco, you're a day ahead of us. It's probably out over there, right?
Not yet.
Not yet. When is it released?
We're 4 p.m. or 6 p.m. or something like that. I think it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they try and line it up so that everybody gets it at once now, so that there's no spoilers get out too soon. But again, I do miss the old midnight release because back before streaming and back before the internet, when you could line up and get the game bang on midnight, it was the earliest opportunity to get it, and no one could spoil it for you unless you were sitting there watching it on their TV. So
yeah,
just shows you how old I am.
Hey, I used to do the midnight launches, Falky. I used to go to GameStop and sit outside and, you know, wait till midnight to get to pick up the game. Actually, one of my more memorable favorite midnight launches was Halo 2. Because there was it was a sequel to Halo. I mean, it was such a big deal. And I'll never forget I got there first in line, and I just remember, they were handing out numbers, and I was one of the first to get a number, and I was actually the first person to get a number. Walked in the store, got my steel case of Halo 2, and the rest is history. I remember rushing back home and playing it. Everyone was online. It was such a big event. So, also want to welcome B Money. B, can you hear us now? He's gone. Okay. I think B's having some issues. All right. Also want to welcome everyone to the live chat. Thank you so much for joining us live. Appreciate the support as always. Do me a favor, hit that like button. Helps out the channel. And if you're new, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. And just a friendly reminder, we don't do the console war stuff here. We are having a vastly different conversation than many of the podcasts out there that are beating the drum, that are spreading FUD. We just don't do that here. I actually heard someone say today that, in fact, Helldivers 2 really isn't a success because it's not as successful as Pow World. So, we just don't make... We don't engage in that level of buffoonery in terms of conversation. So if you're looking for a different level of conversation, you've come to the right place here at BRAP. You may have heard me on my last rant saying, you deserve better, we deserve better when it comes to the discourse around video games and the coverage by even gaming journalists these days has gotten a bit it's gotten bad. It's become bad. Not all of it, but a lot of it, what I've been seeing. So, but that's another conversation. I think B's still. B's actually. Let me move B over here. He's actually in the. Oh, there he is. B, can you hear us? I think B's still having issues. Driver update, B. I hope he figures it out. All right. Anyhow. Component said, thanks for the notification, YouTube. Yeah, YouTube's not always great at notifications. So if you haven't done so, give me a follow at BRAP_podcast. That way you know when I go live. You don't have to rely on YouTube because YouTube isn't reliable. Imagine that. Anyhow. All right. So we have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth releasing tonight at midnight. Releases in a few hours, about 3 hours, slightly less than 3 hours. Currently sits at a 92 Metacritic right now. This game will probably be in the conversation for Game of the Year, I would imagine. Final Fantasy, the last Final Fantasy remake actually was in conversation for Game of the Year. So I am looking forward to this game. And I played the demo when it came out a couple weeks ago, and I just can't wait. I've talked to some people who played it or are playing it right now, and they are just ranting and raving about how great this game is and how great the musical score in this game is as well. And that's actually one of the things I'm looking forward to in playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And also, also kicking Sephiroth's ass as well. So that's because he's got problems. Sephiroth is an interesting protagonist. He's got issues. He's got a lot of issues. He has mom issues as well, but that's another conversation. So anyhow, so Falky, I'm assuming you're picking up Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, then, right?
At some point, I will be.
Okay.
I've got plenty of work and no time for gaming, so it's certainly something I'm going to grab. I love the original Final Fantasy VII, and I like how they did the remake. I'm quite on board with the way that they've updated and made some changes. I'm enjoying it. There's always room for improvement. However, I held off on watching the State of Play piece, and then I finally couldn't resist it anymore. I haven't played the demo. I'm going to wait until I get the game, but the music, the way they've done the music and the way that they've done the open world piece, it looks amazing. It looks really good. So I'm certainly keen to jump in, but in typical Forky fashion, I'm not paying full price for it, and I'm waiting until they get the first few patches sorted out so I can get the best experience.
Yeah, no, it's you mentioned time. I mean, being busy with work, time is a precious commodity. And that's not many of us just don't have unlimited time to play as many games as we like. I'm in that predicament myself, so I completely understand. B, can you hear us now? I see you're in the chat here. It sounds like he's still having some issues. All right. Oh, we'll get to B. Okay, hopefully B can figure this out. All right, B. Hey, hopefully, B, hope you can figure out whatever technical issues you're having. Maybe restart the computer. I don't know.
Those PCs, mate.
What's that?
Those PCs, tell ya.
Yeah, right. Hey, I'm always advocating for PC as the premier platform for gaming, but sometimes they act up. Component 5150 says, "BRAP, some people have too much free time." That is true. All right, Falky. So,
just before you progress, talking about time, I saw a person we both know. I won't name him. I won't name them. They play PC, Nintendo, Xbox, and PlayStation, and they spend a lot of time on Nintendo and PC. Their PlayStation gaming time that they spat out at the end of last year was nearly 2,000 hours.
What?
2,000 hours locked on their profile. And I know they don't have a family. They spent 2,000 hours doing it themselves. And that's on top of their PC and their Nintendo gaming. I was just like, and to put it into context, a full-time job at 40 hours a week, 48 weeks a year, assuming you're lucky enough to get your 4 weeks of year leave, is 1,686 hours or 1,682 hours. So they have spent more than 40 hours a week average, because if you add, there's 160 hours onto that. It's somewhere up around 1,900 hours if you did 40 hours a week every week of the year. And that's doing public holidays as well. That's over 40 hours a week in gaming. How the hell do you get that much free time?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't. And honestly, I couldn't imagine sitting in my house. I've done it before, but I couldn't imagine sitting in my house every day for more than 8 hours gaming. Like I'd have to go out. I'd have to go out and get a beer, do something.
It's phenomenal. It is a phenomenal amount of time. And if they're lucky enough to get it, good on them. But jeez.
Yeah, I can't do it. Yeah. All right, Falcon. Anyway. So we got a lot of unrest in the gaming industry right now. A lot of stuff happening, unfortunately. More layoffs. Sony announced layoffs yesterday. That was the big news item. There was a message by Herman Hulst. An important update from PlayStation Studios. I'll read this here. Today, Sony Interactive Entertainment initiated a reduction in our workforce, including within PlayStation Studios, and I wanted to talk about the impact that will have. These decisions have been extremely difficult, but they are necessary, and I think it's important to be transparent. The U.S.-based studios and groups impacted by reduction in force are Insomniac Games, Naughty Dog, as well as our technology, creative, and supported teams. In UK and European-based studios, it is proposed the PlayStation Studios London studio will close in its entirety. That there will be reductions in Gorilla and Firesprite. These are in addition to some smaller reductions in other teams across PlayStation Studios. Our goal at PlayStation Studios has always been to make the best games for PlayStation fans and our global community of studios. Represent some of the most creative and talented teams within the gaming industry. Now, PlayStation 5 is in its 4th year, and we are at a stage where we need to step back and look at what our business needs. At the same time, our industry has experienced continuing and fundamental change which affects how we all create and play games. Delivering the immersive, narrative-driven stories that PlayStation Studios is known for at the quality bar that we aspire to requires a reevaluation of how we operate. Delivering and sustaining social online experiences, allowing PlayStation gamers to explore our worlds in different ways, as well as launching games on additional devices such as PC and mobile, requires a different approach and different resources. To take on these challenges, PlayStation Studios had to grow. We have brought brilliant and successful studios into our family. We have invested in new technology and partnerships. We have recruited talent from across our industry and beyond. But growth itself is not ambition. PlayStation Studios is committed to continually discovering ways to work together, collaborating, combining our efforts to ensure that we are able to craft games that push the boundaries of play and deliver what you expect from us. We looked at our studios and our portfolio, evaluating projects in various stages of development, and have decided that some of those projects will not move forward. I want to be clear that the decision to stop work on these projects is not a reflection on the talent or passion of the team members. Our philosophy has always been to allow creative experimentation. Sometimes great ideas don't become great games. Sometimes a project is started with the best intentions before shifts within the market or industry result in a change of plan. I'm deeply saddened to see the talented individuals leave the company. So much admiration, appreciation, respect for their work. PlayStation Studios will continue to be a creator-led organization driven by evolving our beloved franchises and bringing our new gameplay experiences of the highest quality to our fans. Thank you for all your continued support. So that was Herman Hulst's comments with regards to the layoffs here at PlayStation. We know that one of the games that was impacted was a games as a service game that was rumored to be the what is it? Oh Jesus, Twisted Metal game. But so Falky, just reading and hearing his commentary, and this comes after Hiroki Totoki in a Q&A talked about the low profit margins, and that's probably I think a good place to start, because listening to his commentary, I thought to myself, oh, this is there's probably going to be some layoffs, because anytime I hear we didn't hit it, and I just went through this exercise myself this past summer, and unfortunately there's, as I mentioned to you before we went live, Falky, the organization I'm a part of is getting ready to do some layoffs as well. But anytime I hear, hey, we're not going to hit what we projected, we're going to come in much lower, it's impacted our profit margins, I immediately think a layoff's coming. That's just been my experience in the 17 years that I've been in TNA, not the wrestling organization here in the U.S., but a talent acquisition. That anytime you hear that, it's like, oh shit, like there's going to be some layoffs. There's going to be some kind of reorganization, reprioritization of the organization, and there's going to be, focusing on streamlining, creating operational efficiencies. And unfortunately, as I said, it typically means there's going to be layoffs. They're going to, and that's a quick way to kind of, I hate to say it, but slash expenses off, reduce the budget, right? By getting rid of some of those FTEs. So I thought that was going to probably happen when Totoki was discussing some of the things that they were looking at. Did you get that? Did you also get that sense too, Falky, and what Totoki was talking about a couple weeks ago in that Q&A? And did you also think that, hey, there's probably going to be some layoffs?
Yeah, it's been something that Lin Tao flagged in an investors conversation nearly 12 months ago. It would have been about this time 12 months ago, if not earlier, where they said, we've got to focus on profit margin, and not profit margin, but profitability and value for money, investments, and all that sort of stuff. It's not unsurprising that they're going down this pathway, because it's, when you take a deep look into their financial performance, from what came out of the reports 2 weeks ago now, the December quarterly reports, and they revised down their forecasts and whatnot. They're not exactly swimming in money, and they never have been. But the impact is their year-to-date profit, their operating income year-to-date before paying taxes and all the rest and whatnot was just on $1 billion. From $22 billion they generate, they've managed to generate just $1 billion in profit. So there's not an issue in terms of the selling side of things, because people are buying them. MPD and Sakana were saying, spending on gaming is up in the US, and we've got similar reports coming out in the tracking analytics out of Europe and parts of EMEA and Asia and whatnot. The spending on gaming is consistent and maintained at a stable level. The growth isn't huge, but we know we're not in a growth phase because of other economic impacts across all industries, really. But the problem is that the costs continue to increase, and the inflation factor and all the rest of it coming into play. Inflation is just the rate of how much it does, the speed of how it increases. So the only way to stop costs increasing is for inflation to be zero. But when inflation is zero, then markets react by cranking stuff into them to try and get inflation to grow. So they've had this massive plateau of revenue side. They've got this massive uplift in cost side, and it's not plateauing at the same point in the forecasts looking forward as what the revenue is. So the margin's getting squeezed like crazy, and they've got to make changes at some point to fix it. So they will have identified the changes 12 months ago, and they started making his commentary. And you can see it in a bit of a phase. First comments are, we've identified there's a problem. We're going to let the studios come back to us and sort it out themselves. 12 months later, sorry, studios haven't managed to fix it themselves. Now the big guys are going to step in and help them fix it. So we've got the situation we're in at the moment pretty much across the industry, where the cost control part of it is being led no longer by the creators, but it's being led by the bean counters to try and stop the creators from just running away and spending stupid amounts of money that on creative ideas that are never going to make it to market or be commercially viable. There's some boundaries have to be in place. You can't just let them be creative led on everything. They've got to be sensible. And that's what Hiroki Totoki was referring to when he made those comments about that they just don't understand what translates from sales into bottom line earnings per share returns. They don't see what drivers translate from one to the other. They're just throwing money at a wall and hoping it sticks on some of these ideas. They cancel games all the time. They change strategies all the time. We just happen to hear about it because of the day and age of free information and what do you call it? The democratization of people's opinions via social media. So we're at that stage now where a lot of people on social media are throwing up their hands going, oh, it's doom, it's gloom, it's this, it's that, it's everything else, it's in trouble, and all the rest of it. And I'm like, well, yes, it is. And the next question they ask is, what are they going to do to fix it? Like, they're doing it now. They've picked this problem up 12, 18 months ago and started making adjustments. And they went through it in a methodical phase to not cut their nose off to spite their face and completely tank their ability to continue to generate those huge revenues. There's some arguments around as to whether different organisations taking a different approach. So Sony's cut 900-ish. That's, from what we've seen so far, that's mostly coming from community managers, VFX artists and VFX managers and whatnot. But it's been sort of confirmed 2 games out of the live service have been quashed, but PlayStation shelved or cancelled 6 non-live service games in the last 12 months, but no one talks about that because it doesn't fit the narrative of shitting on Sony for taking this live service approach that people didn't want. So what you're seeing out there in terms of the reporting and the communications and whatnot, it's distorted to provide views and for people to be able to get clicks. And fair enough, if they want, that's their hustle, then that's fine. But there's so much nuance, and it's been identified for a long time. And everyone says, the cost of AAA games. Well, yeah, they do cost a bomb to make, but there's a reason for that. It's because they're not shortchanging the developers, and they're not overloading the developers. We didn't want developers being crunched like crazy, so we employ more people to avoid that crunch. That costs money. They want to put all this other stuff in these games because that's what they want to do as a creative. That costs money. People demand certain levels of... You look at the Spider-Man 2 cluster that happened. They showed a 9-month-old build at one of the state of plays, and people slammed them for the graphics not being good enough. Well, to get it from what they showed to the end piece, that cost money. That cost millions of dollars of investment to get it up to the spit and polish shine that it was. So on one hand, these people are criticizing what happens, and then they're criticizing the cost of getting it up to the level that they expect. And then they complain about the cost of games being unsustainable. It's like they're just these commentary talking points, and the commentators that do it just go in this vicious cycle. All they're trying to do is just create this never-ending cycle of crap, so they've got something to talk about and whinge about and complain about. And people get sucked into that spiral all the time. What they're doing at the moment, and EA is the best example of the pivot or the flexibility that's required now. They're not going to waste money on licensing deals that they don't see are commercially viable. Great. Excellent. Stop pumping that crap out that we don't want to see. They are going to solidify and update some of their progress and processes for doing their core game development. That's excellent. Let's see more of that. Let's see some of these games get the attention they deserve. And they're going to invest in better technologies to make sure those games don't take 5 years to get to us, but they can be done in 3 years. Well, if the technology exists, fucking use it. Great. The shorter time frame, if it takes you 3 years to get it to market instead of 5 years, you've just knocked out 40% of your labor cost in that game. You can sell just as many units. That's excellent. Or the other side of the coin, being the market is being flooded with games of a decent quality at AA and indie level because of the technology that's available. Games like Sifu and Kenna Bridge of Spirits and what's that other one that's just come out? Pacific Drive. They're small teams. Helldivers is a team of less than 100 people. And doing gangbusters. They don't need 6, 7, 800,000 person studios to build a good game. But there is a place in the market for those big AAA games, narrative-driven, story-told games like PlayStation makes. PlayStation just needs to figure out how they can make them better and faster and not as expensively. Otherwise, they're going to have to downsize even further, and we won't get 4 or 5 first-party games out of PlayStation as an average. We might get 1 or 2 every year as an average. But then they got to find a spot in the marketplace to release them. So you look at the cadences coming out. Helldivers, and then today is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and then what's next? Is it Rise of the Ronin, and then Stellar Blade, and then the Elden Ring DLC or something in May, June? Like there's one every month for the next 6 months of a major title or a major release related to a title. I've been saying just as we started, we got bugger all time to play these things, but if you got that cadence release of the big stuff, and then you got this ever-increasing quality of the AA's and smaller games filtering in amongst it, it's not like that there's an increase in the amount of time people have to play games, and the number of people playing games has stagnated. So it starts to become an oversupply into the market, and that's where the real threat of things dropping off will come. And if they don't get their costs in control, it'll capitulate in a big crash.
So, Falky, what you're describing to me, what's happening, and I want to welcome Game Logic. Logic, can you hear us? I want to make sure you can hear us. I know B-Money was having some issues.
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Okay, perfect. Logic, welcome to the show. Appreciate you joining us this evening. Logic and I have been talking a lot of behind the scenes, a lot about what's going on in the industry today. And you know, I look at this, Falky, and just listening to you, I look at it, and like I said to you before we went live, to me, this seems like a course correction that we were. I think Logic, you had coined this phrase. You're eating high on the hog. Did I get that right? The industry.
Yeah, I mean thereabouts. I mean and I'm not. I don't want to make light of anything, but you know, another analog.
Absolutely.
Another analog that I thought of before the show was we go through this in government contracting, you know, every few years, right? I mean, you look at the Reagan years, extending it into the Bush administration, and we were all living high on the hog, right? People. I mean, and it's not even necessarily a matter of over hiring, right? It's just little things here and there, like if you're a program manager, all of a sudden you are authorized to have headcount for a deputy, which normally you don't have. You just have to suck it up. If you're running a development team, normally where you don't have a discrete scrum master, you typically take that out of hide and you make an app lead a developer and let them be the scrum master. Now you're authorized to have a dedicated scrum master. It's little things like that typically, you know, walk the dog in companies to a point where you're a little heavy on headcount. And then, you know, again, going back to the government contracting example, then the Clinton administration comes along, spending gets tightened up. It's a constricted fiduciary environment, right? The optics become different on profitability and where there are bodies. And so, you know, different decisions and kind of different organizational structures get made. So, I mean, in the gaming industry, we've seen course corrections. You know, the really bad one was the video game market crash of 1983 in the U.S. But then there was also a course correction in the transition from Generation 7 to Generation 8, right? So that 2013, 2014 timeframe. There were large layoffs at Sony. Sony Corporation laid off 10,000 people. Then the following year, they laid off a number of thousands of people from the gaming division. During the PlayStation 3 generation era, there were numerous studio closures. Whenever those studios produced games, it didn't hit. And I can't remember. I always get this mixed up. I want to say it was Psygnosis. Maybe I have that studio name wrong, but the studio that did the Wipeout franchise, Remember, they were closed. And they were actually that studio is weird, but where they were closed, and then all those veteran developers went off and like opened their own studio, and then if I'm not mistaken, they were recently reacquired by Sony. And I was like, I don't know why you guys would go back after they closed your studio the last time. But my point is that if you look at and lay out the 50-year history of the industry, there have been these points in time where there has been a significant readjustment. And then if you look at other industries and you look at industrial micro revolutions and things that happen, it is not unusual in industries for there to be a contraction of large companies and for there to be a resetting, and for those companies to shrink and get much smaller before they restart their ramp up towards growth again. I mean, my personal outlook is, I think we're going through a correction. I don't believe we're headed for a crash of 1983.
Yeah,
right? I see that bandied about an awful lot, and I really kind of don't know where it's coming from. I think it's a little sensationalist and a very wide extrapolation, but things are going to be tough, and they're going to be tough for a while, right? They're not gonna fix themselves, in 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you, Logic. I've seen a lot of the sensationalism around this idea the sky's falling. There's going to be a crash. This is the worst the industry's ever been. It might be in terms of layoffs, and at least in my recent memory. But this is a course correction. I mean, I brought up, what you said about companies living high off the hog. I mean, they were, and Falk and I were discussing this before we went live. There's a lot of money coming to gaming during COVID. I mean, there was a tremendous boom period that just wasn't going to be sustainable. And like you said, Logic, and what Falky said and what I've said, this is a course correction. And I think for some people, where some of the fears coming from is that maybe they haven't paid attention to other industries where this has happened, where this is kind of, like I said to Falky, it's all cyclical. It's a business, and there's going to be course correction when the money isn't coming in like it used to. Tough decisions are going to be made. There's going to be a reorg. There's going to be restructuring. There's going to be reprioritization of how companies or where companies invest. And this is what we're seeing in the gaming industry. And and obviously there's clearly a course correction because this is impacting everyone. EA just came out, announced layoffs. But they're not who was the other studio recently? There's another one, I think last week, that announced layoffs. I can't think of him right now. But this is happening across the industry. The only one who we haven't heard from, interestingly enough, is Nintendo. There haven't been any layoffs there. But B, can you hear us? I know you were having some issues.
Yeah, I'm here, man. What's going on?
All right, B. Hey, B, can you turn up your mic just a little bit?
Is that better?
A little bit more, man.
Let me go in the settings.
All right.
Change it in there.
Yeah, B, I know you were trying to get in. You were having some issues with Discord. So B, what are your I know you've what are your thoughts on what some of the things that we've discussed so far about the course correction in the gaming industry right now?
Hold on one second.
Yep. And by the way, everyone in the live chat, we have 140 people watching. Please hit that like button. Helps out the channel. If you're new, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. Falky, I'm going to come back to you after B. I got a question for you, Falky, about something that someone made a claim about in the chat. But yeah, go ahead, B. I can hear you fine now, man.
All right. I mean, kind of like you guys said, it's definitely a course correction. It's something that I've been talking about for a while. We were gonna kind of get to this point because the traditional games aren't selling like they used to. I've been talking about this since the beginning of the generation. It kind of started last generation. Some of those bigger games, you could kind of tell that they weren't hitting those same high numbers that the previous games were doing, and it's kind of continued into this generation. The big boom of games as a service has changed the way a lot of people buy games, play games, interact with the medium. So when you have big players like the Fortnites, and things like that. That drastically changes the playing field because um, it's less players who are going to be spending money,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just a trickle down, and something I've been talking about for a long time, and now it's coming to a head.
Yeah. So, B, when you say traditional games, you mean like the traditional AAA game, not the games as a service game, but the single player, you play it for 30, 40 hours and you're done with the game.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
and it doesn't technically have to be just a single player game. Even multiplayer games that aren't games as a service. We don't even get those games anymore because everything has turned into a service-based game. If you just look at Ubisoft, we haven't gotten a Splinter Cell game in quite a long time. What they've done to Rainbow Six and Ghost Recon is take them away from the traditional release that they used to have that had a campaign and a multiplayer suite, similar to how we get the yearly Call of Duty games. What they've done to those games is turn those games into service-based games, and we haven't gotten a new Rainbow Six game since last generation. They're still eating off that same game.
Yeah. They're making a lot of money off that one game.
They are.
Yeah. It's interesting, but you mentioned go ahead.
So when you have, when they come out and announce that they've had 70 million players play Rainbow Six Siege since its release, and they still have a dedicated, crowd of players, playing that, daily, weekly, monthly. Where's the time to buy, the latest release? Why would they even care if they're fully invested into a game like that?
Yeah, those games are time sinks. I mean, I've lived that. I mean, I went through a phase where I only played PUBG. Like that's all I played. And then I went through a phase where I only played Warzone. And I didn't play anything else. And then I went through a phase where I only played Fortnite. And then I bought a, I guess, quote unquote traditional game and Baldur's Gate 3, and I sunk about 400 hours. And that was the only thing that I played. So, but it's fascinating. I guess my question is, and just kind of piggyback off what B said, and I'll throw this out to the panel. Whoever wants to tackle this question here, but like, what happens now with the industry? Because a lot of the conversation I'm seeing is, oh, well, AAA games are, they're expensive, and they're competing in the space where there's games as a service games. Those games are time sinks. It's not as easy to sell those games, AAA games or traditional games, to many players as it was before. So what happens now? I mean, because some of the narrative that I'm seeing is, hey, AAA games might go the way of the dodo bird. So what are your thoughts? I'll just throw this out to the panel. Everyone wants to chime in. Logic, Falky, B Money, anyone?
My bad. I had to step away for a second to let my dog out.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
No, I was asking, like we just like, there's a lot of the conversations, like what happens with AAA games now. It's harder to sell these games. It's there's higher risk involved now. There's more competition in the space. You said, B Money, there's these games as a service games that are like time sinks, that are pulling eyes away from some of these other games. And some of the conversation that I'm seeing and what I've heard from even watching some podcasts is that, oh, well, Sony's in trouble and the AAA games are probably going to go to the way of the dodo bird. You think that's going to happen?
No, not at all. I think there's just going to be less games being released over time, which is another thing I've talked about for a long time. There's way too many games that release. From these big companies and some of the smaller ones. If you just look at February and look at the amount of releases that released on console, that's more releases than what we used to see in an entire year from some of these big publishers. So it's like they have to learn to scale back. They have to make room. They're going to make better bets. on bigger projects. Because you also have to think, like, even with what Rockstar did with GTA and turning GTA and and actually having an online component and letting that kind of carry everything that Rockstar did for an entire generation. That is upon us again next year.
Yeah, GTA 6 is going to be, I mean, I anticipate that game's going to be huge.
Right. So, what are all the other big publishers supposed to do when everybody's eyes and ears are going to be glued to everything that GTA 6 has going on next year and beyond? You know what I mean? So, it's going to be a lot of readjustments. Budgets are going to change. I think we're going to get less games. I think people are going to focus on their own IP. You see a lot of that talk coming from a lot of these publishers and developers saying that they want to kind of get away from the license deals and focus on their own IP because that's going to be more profitable for them. So I think that's what's going to happen. I think we'll get less games over time. Especially from like the big publishers. I think they'll make a lot more smart bets come down the pipeline. I think EA learned a really big lesson over the last year or two with those EA originals that they put out. They signed those games and nobody bought them. Neither one of them.
Well, that's the thing, B. Like I've heard people say, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I've seen this narrative. Well, we just need more creative games, and I tend to think in terms of creativity. I think that, at least in my opinion, I see that I tend to see that come from smaller titles, smaller developers, but I don't see people necessarily buying those games all the time
because that's not what they want. People will say that they want creative games, but that's not what they want. They want the biggest, best games for their money. And that's evident by the highest game sales if we just look at the charts every year. The biggest and best games are the games that sell. People don't want creative games. There's creative games that come out every day from small indie developers.
Yeah, and that's not to say, by the way, B, that none of these games ever sell. I mean, there's some gems that come out that do well, but for the most part, like you don't hear the conversation around those games as much. You don't see them charting NPD as much.
Right, and that's what I mean. So yeah, you can say that, but when there's 400 million technically we have 400 million, if not more, gamers in the console space. Combine that with PC. And one of these creative games sells 1 million copies, and we say, "Wow, woohoo! They sold 1 million copies." That means a splash in the pan of gamers cared about that game.
Mm-hmm.
Woohoo! Yeah. They did 1 million copies. Mm-hmm. That's great for them. But there's 400 million gamers, and only 1 million people cared about it.
Yeah, it's 0.25%.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Logic, what are your thoughts about AAA games? Because you and I've talked about this. We've heard people's commentary on AAA games. Oh, they're going to go away. They're not sustainable. But the demand's still there. Like B said, people want these games. We talk about MPD Circana. Look at the top 20. I think you pulled that list a couple days ago when we were chatting about this. I forget how many are AAA, but number one on MPD last month was a AAA game. And
so I mean, where I am, well, first of all, with the social media commentary, like if I hear not sustainable one more time, like it's a let me just be, and I apologize to anybody that this is layered at, because I know a lot of people use that term. It's a shitball lazy term. It's a term that people use as a label when they cannot articulate what it is that they mean, and 99% of the time that they use it, they don't know what it means. Right? What does not sustainable mean? if it means that you are trying to put out 10 AAA games in a year and only 2 of them wind up being profitable, and you can articulate what the negative impacts are from the other 8, then I'll buy your use of the label unsustainable. But right now, we don't have any data pointing us in that direction. At least not at the portfolio level, at least not that anybody has talked about. We've talked about PlayStation having narrowing profit margins from a point in time when its profit margins for the gaming division were at the 12, 13% point, right? And now they're down at the 6 or 7% point. Is that all software? I don't know. I haven't looked at it yet at that level of detail. Over what time is that? When did that decline specifically happen? So my problem with this notion of AAA games not being sustainable, again, nobody. I just haven't seen anybody walk that dog and do that math. So when we talk about the AAA, now if you can talk about, if people would get around to it, you can talk about the number of AAA game projects that get started. First of all, those AAA games shouldn't necessarily be a large financial drain until they are out of pre-production and into production, and you really start staff ramp. Up until that point, you have probably a very small number of people actually working on the project, right? Maybe 2 dozen-ish at most, maybe just north of that at most. But until you really start ramp up, you're really not expending really big dollars. And so if the project is canceled before that, I don't know that that's a big drain. Now, when you get staff up at when you get a project team up at about 50% ramp of where you think you're going to hit at your peak, and then you cancel and people work on it for 3 years, 4 years, then you could have a discussion about how much of a drain that is. But again, I just don't know, right? We've heard that PlayStation has canceled projects. How far were those things into projects? B and I were just going back and forth about what's going on with Battlefield, right? And I talked about this a little bit last night on talking about games. So you have one of the 2 founding directors of Ridgeline Studios, a new studio that was opened up under EA, who just departed. The other co-founder, director, departed last month in the month of January. The last creative director for Battlefield, coming off of Battlefield 2042, out of DICE, just left in fall of 2022. So Ridgeline only had that game for 17 months. Were they at 50% or higher staff ramp to put that next version of Battlefield out? I'm not exactly sure. 17 months generally isn't enough time to transition out of pre-production into major production, into full staff ramp. So how much money was expended on that team? Some, yes, definitely not zero, right? But was an amount expended on it to the point of you being able to utilize the term AAA development is not sustainable? I don't necessarily buy that. But somebody would have to walk me through that math. So the major thing I think that I would think about in terms of PlayStation, at least for that particular scenario, is we go back to the beginning of the generation and what Jim Ryan said, which was that he wanted a faster cadence out of his marquee AAA studios. So out of Sucker Punch, out of Naughty Dog, you can decide whether or not you throw Bend in there or not. Sony Santa Monica. But he wanted, and basically what he was talking about was like, look, if you have a console and it's on the market for 7 years, there's an X number of games that need to come out of that, right, to justify the amount of R&D, the amount of low-rate initial production, right, and the amount of time that console is on the street, that it's not profitable, that you're losing money, that upfront investment. And if in the previous generation, in a console life cycle of about 7 years of it being the preeminent, right, console on the market for your brand, then maybe that cadence used to be, 10 games, right? 12 games, 15 games, whatever, right? His point was that this generation, he wanted more than that number of games so that the sell-through would be higher and that the total ROI, when you look back over a 7-year time frame, was better. That's not what they're getting right now, right? And then that is therefore kind of a problem. And then you talk about, right, the fact that they haven't necessarily hit, numbers. Granted, I think that was a super aggressive target. At the end of the day, all this is a mishmash of word salad that just means they're not hitting KPIs, they're not hitting OKRs, right? And they've got to do a readjustment. to justify the level of staff that they had, to justify the number of projects that they had in flight. Herman Hulst made a comment in his letter about creative-led studios and them working on projects. But as he mentioned, not all projects at a certain point are pointed in a direction where they're going to prove out to be either A, good projects, and or B, profitable projects. And so you see them cutting fat. You see them pulling Media Molecule back from what they were doing. You see them, closing down London studios. You see them making choices to tighten up the belt, which again was a lot of similar things that they did in the PlayStation 3 generation. Because in the PlayStation 3 generation, for a chunk of it, they were losing to Xbox. And so there were a lot of well wishes and a lot of good intentions, but the fiscal decisions were made that, hey, we're not gonna, this is not the time to afford everybody to have the creative latitude, that they wanted. You see them pulling back from VR. You see them focusing on, let's get PSVR 2 PC compatible so that they can push those things over the cliff and let people buy them to use them with Steam, right, and kind of be done with that business venture. So I think they're going to make readjustments. Herman Hulst, what I read out of his email was that they're not backing off of AAA, not in the manner in which other people are articulating it. He's talking about providing the same types of experiences that the PlayStation brand is known for. He's talking about the big thing that I took away from that email is he's talking about providing them at the same level of quality, which to me, for the PlayStation brand, isn't just about how good the game is, but is also a nod towards how big the game is, how impactful the game is, how much the game pulls at heartstrings, right? That cinematic narrative style of game. So I don't have any thought that those are going away. I think that they're going to retool. You and I talked earlier today. I think the big thing that people have skated by and no one paid attention to in his email, and probably appropriately so. But I think as we get over the fact that unfortunately people have lost their jobs, we need to swing back around to talking about the business analysis part of it. And the major thing that came out of that email was that they are going to restructure and they're going to reorg. And then you look at Herman Hulst's email, and he says that we're going to rethink and look at how our studios work together and how they collaborate. What I expect to see is some of these studios merged. I expect to see some of these studios grouped and bundled into smaller divisions and departments so that there is some oversight at the 5 or 6 studio level, given that they have 23 studios or so now. I expect there to be, I keep mentioning how the person who came up during the DICE Awards and received an award mentioned kind of this thing that told me that there are periodic incremental project reviews. I think we're going to see some spreading out of that type of responsibility and accountability, so it's not just all Herman Hulst doing that. I think B, who was the lady who hosted the showcase along with Herman? The lady who came over from Apple.
Benson.
Yeah. Yeah, so I expect to see her taking on some of that responsibility and managing things at the portfolio level and providing some level of creative oversight. So, I mean, we'll see. I expect to see. I mean, a big thing, that Herman also said, and it's a thing that I've asked a constant question about, particularly in the case of Xbox, because that is like literally wired into the DNA of Microsoft. But I expect to start seeing something similar in PlayStation. I do not understand why all of these studios have their own IT department, their own test organization, their own CI/CD pipeline. Yeah, I don't get that.
Yeah, that's weird.
And if Totoki has gotten eyeballs on that, I guarantee. Well, I should say guarantee, but I'll just say it for emotion. I guarantee you that's the type of thing that's going to be tightened up, right, and go away.
Oh, he's probably pulling his hair out. Why haven't we centralized all these functions yet?
He won't be pulling his hair out. He'll be getting his razor really sharpened. Because let's not forget. Sorry, just to interject. Let's not forget. Hiroki Totoki is the interim president of SIE, so he's the top dog at SIE at the end of next month, right? He's effectively in the role now, but from the 1st of April, he's the one with the responsibility hat on. But he's also the chief operations officer for Sony and the chief financial officer for Sony. So think about the guy that's got the most power to do whatever the hell he wants. He's now in charge of PlayStation, their biggest division.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's gonna. I think, like you said, Falky, there's gonna be more cuts. I mean, I think and I forget. I don't know if you said that there might be more. Do you say there might be more layoffs? Is that what you're predicting?
I expect there will be.
Yeah. Well, interesting.
I expect it will be. Again, just to go with what. Sorry to interrupt Logic when he's on a roll, but it's been a long lead into this point. We've known about it 12 to 18 months. I mean, Connie Booth and her team of 5 people were overseeing all the US studios. They have failed to produce what was requested of them. There's no two ways about it. They failed it. Simple as that. So Connie's gone, her management team's gone, and they split it up between Herman and someone else to look after. And the other person that's looking after it is not a productions person. They are a finance person. So there'll be a review going on there. There'll be eyes on that thing like crazy. And like Logic said, it sets the platform that Herman's not going to be the one to look after everything. It'll drive the guy up the wall and probably into an early grave by trying to do that. Restructures are good because it gets rid of redundant resources, and I don't mean for it to sound bad, but that's just how it is. But that's not to say that, any business is a big business, small business, it doesn't matter. There's risk associated with working somewhere, particularly when you're selling to consumers.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of scope to do a restructure. If this was something that Ryan was talking about with his seniors, because it usually comes from that level, 6-12 months ago, and it was turning into it. I mean, Jim Ryan went through the last 2 and didn't come out of it with a lot of happiness. So I can understand why he'd want to retire and not have to go through another one. But since they centralized everything instead of having 3 regions, they've had nothing but problems, and they never really did cut out a heap of redundant resources after the last big one, which was surprising. But given that it was probably on the cards just as we were rolling into PS5 launches and things were starting to get a little bit hectic there, I can understand why it wouldn't have been on their radar. But there's the whole doomsday thing is just AAA games are going to be around for a while because there's people that'll pay for them. So
yeah. Well,
just getting that other side of it sorted out. There's a point to having redundancy in your IT teams, but you don't want to have your IT team localized in 4 different parts of the same city. You just have it housed in one location. And again, just sorry to carry on, but let's not forget that when you look at the financial reports, it's not just AAA game development that are in those PlayStation numbers. PlayStation's got to fork out for Evo. PlayStation's forking out for the PC conversion stuff that hasn't come through yet. PlayStation's forking out for the storefront. PlayStation's forking out for a shitload of stuff because they're the biggest part of the Sony environment at the moment. So they're copping costs on an allocation basis based on either headcount or revenue generation that they're probably carrying other divisions. But that's the decision that they signed up for. So it's not just AAA game development that's causing them issues. There's a heap of other costs that are buried in there as well, just to do with their ventures outside of game development.
Yeah, I'm gonna grab some super chats here real quick, Falcon. I don't disagree with you. I think clearly there's a strong demand signal by the consumer market for AAA games. Again, we point to, if you look at the Circana, top 20 best-selling games of that month, they're majority of them are AAA games. I mean, those games are still in demand. So I want to grab the super chat. JD Gamer with a $10 super chat says the problem with that analysis, and maybe you can answer this, Logic. The problem with that analysis, I think he's referring to you, Logic. The problem with that analysis is that multiple CEOs and CFOs from across the industry have walked that dog and done that math. They have all stated AAA development as it is now is not sustainable.
Who has said that? What is the source? Put the URL in chat.
Well, he said Phil Spencer and Sean Layden. And I can tell you, JD Gamer, you don't have the entire context of what Sean Layden... this is... Okay. We got to stop doing... Yeah,
I'll answer that. I'm happy to answer that one.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Logic.
No, I was going to let it go. Look, JD Gamer is intellectually dishonest. He's come in here in chat multiple times. I'm done dealing with his foolishness and his childish. You make a statement like that, shut up, walk the dog, do the math, put the URL in chat, and stop coming in here and playing games. We have no time for children. We have no time for people coming in here and console warring. You're only over here to brand defend Xbox. If you like your Xbox, go play your Xbox. You don't have to come over here and tell lies and untruths and be dishonest in order to get your point across. Just put the URL in chat and be done with it and stop wasting our time.
Well, I was going to say, I'll let you grab the mic here, Falky, so you can answer that question too. But what JD Gamer doesn't have the full context of what Sean Layden said. And I've asked him in the live chat, I don't think he's answered. And I asked him specifically, what did Sean Layden say was the number one contributor to AAA games not being sustainable in their current form? And Sean Layden said it's not increase in team size. It's not increase in development costs. It's the fact that for the most part, AAA game development, the prices have remained pretty much static. They're cheap. They're not keeping up with the increased cost of development.
And he knows that, or he should know it. And he also knows that Phil Spencer saying that it's not the context is completely different when the guy who's saying it, who's number 3 in the industry right now and can't sell games on his platform and can't drive subscriber numbers and can't sell consoles.
Yeah.
So again, that's just an intellectually dishonest statement, and it's just foolishness, and it's a waste of the panel's time.
Falk, do you want to answer? I know you said you had something else to chime in with regards to that super chat. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say the context is always important, and you just basically said what I was going to say. Sean Layton's commentary around is unsustainable. It is clearly, and they are taking steps now, or have been taking steps for the last 2 years to try and make it more sustainable, whilst not sacrificing the quality. Sean, PlayStation, EA, and a couple of others have decided to go the cost control route. That's option A. Microsoft and a couple of others have chosen to go the quality route. That's option B. You can't have it both ways. And it's just emerging technologies are what's going to cause it. I've said it plenty of times. You look at what it costs to make the latest iteration of Spider-Man 2 versus Spider-Man as an example. Spider-Man 2 took just as much time. They reused assets and they pumped a shitload of time into making it look better. They could have not spent that extra time making it look better, just gone with the rehash and upgrade like they're doing a remaster of The Last of Us Part 1 or something. Don't spend all that extra time making it look better and putting all this extra shit on the screen and all the rest of it, and the game takes half as much time to make. So...
And then gamers complain.
It's all subjective. It's all subjective. It comes down to, and I said this earlier, if the creatives want to do all this stuff and they don't have boundaries and they don't have oversight, they will burn cash like no tomorrow. That's their prerogative. They're there to create. But they must have someone now come in for oversight and actually look at it and go, you know what? That's a great idea, but don't even bother because it's never going to be worth putting it in here. There's no cost benefit that's going to come from that. I'm sorry, you can't do it. Don't bother spending the time and effort on it. Or they just got to rein the games in a little bit and go, well, that's great, but you don't need to have starships flying in the sky in the far distance that's barely 2 pixels on a screen. Cut that shit out. You don't need it. Stop working on it. And it's simple. It's simple. The cost blowouts of AAA games are from their own creativity. It's easy controlled. And it just comes down to putting those reins on. Simple. So, yeah.
Well, and the other thing is, who we don't hear saying that AAA games are unsustainable. I don't hear Strauss Zelnick saying that. I don't hear Yves Guillemot saying that. I don't hear heads of third-party big publishers saying that. We want to talk about unsustainability and JD Gamer coming in here to brand defend. Let me ask you a few questions since you need mommy and daddy to do your analysis for you, and since you need to quote CEOs who are talking. Tell me your own answer to these questions. How is Game Pass not draining value and money out of the industry by distributing games and incentivizing gamers to not spend $70 per game? Tell me how the revenue that's being distributed from Game Pass, a subscription service whose numbers have remained static for a 2-year time frame, tell me how that has not drained dollars out of the industry. This whole narrative from the Xbox community about consoles are capped and that there's no growth if that's the case, then that also has to be somewhat attributable to Game Pass. Why was Game Pass not the shot in the arm that brought new gamers into the market and allowed additional revenue to come into the market? Those are things that also need to be answered from the Xbox camp and from the Xbox perspective. Because if the new business model and distributing games and putting them on multiple screens was the strategy, or is the strategy that you guys are saying is supposed to work, right? Because all of those AAA games, the ones that supposedly Xbox has, all of those games are available on all those screens right now, today. Sarah Bond saying that that Xbox is seeing double-digit growth on mobile and in PC and in cloud, right? Which includes cloud access to games over mobile screens. Although of course, anybody should know who isn't just listening to CEO sound bites should know that double-digit growth from nothing isn't really any remarkable feat. Right? So my question again is, if putting games on multiple screens is the winning strategy, and that's what leads to all these narratives that have run around and cropped up out of nowhere over the last month, then why isn't that strategy causing the growth that should have happened? How in the world has Game Pass been in existence for 6 years? How in the world has Xbox been pushing Xbox Cloud Gaming for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? And yet there's continued to be no growth amongst the console industry. Both of those things can't be true. All of the narratives that you propound and that are hooked and tied to the sound bites that you come in here and drop cannot concurrently be true. Those are instances that actually do rail against my cliche about the problem with gamers being that they don't allow for two states of existence to be in place at the same time. So when you can answer those questions, then you can come back here and participate. Until then, you can sit in the corner with your damn dunce cap on, right? Oh, do your homework, and then when you can come in here and have a cogent, succinct conversation that's factually based on actual sources, instead of making all types of proclamations, but then you can't post URLs, right? This is a podcast for adults. It doesn't come on during Saturday morning cartoon time or afternoon playtime. You want to come in here and participate, then come in here and act age appropriate with the other members of the audience.
The other thing I was going to say, the commentary of it's not sustainable. You brought up Strauss Zelnick, the gentleman from Ubisoft. And Falky, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if it wasn't sustainable, if there was no money to be made here, Sony wouldn't be taking the steps it's taking to reevaluate their business and figure out how to make it a little more profitable, squeeze more pennies. They'd be like, you know what? No, this thing's really unsustainable. Why are we doing this? We're out. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so they're currently running at, what are they running at? 4.8 or 5.2% on their operating income percentage margin at the moment. And that's like they've made year to date to the end of December, the 3 months, 3 quarters to the end of December, they've done $1.27 billion in their operating income out of $22 billion worth of revenue, right? So that's not that flash, but if they're 8.6% at that level, and they just need to get above 12.5 or to make it worthwhile, all they got to do is add another $1 billion into that, and happy days. Like it's 900 people out at 100,000 plus on costs and all the rest of it. They're nearly there, and when you consider the net impact, obviously they've got to pay them out and they've got to offload, offboard and all the rest of it. Then you've got occupancy costs that go down and whatnot. If they get in there and start actually getting rid of all the redundant stuff and upgrading their technologies and stuff like they do, because let's be honest, they don't go in and do the latest and greatest versions of computer hardware, software, service switches, and development tools and all the rest of it every year. They're probably, and you look at their reports, that the depreciation is dropping off because they've got old shit. So they need new shit. So they need to go and buy some new stuff. Well, in order to do that, you need cash. They don't have a lot of cash because they're fucking spending it on game development. And they've been pissing it up the wall recently on game development, on ideas that are just not commercial. So now they need to go back, rethink their strategy, upgrade their technologies, upgrade their software and all the rest of it, find some better partnerships to get into with, and reduce their footprints. And it might mean cohabitats for big studios that are close together, like Naughty Dog, Santa Monica, might end up in the same building.
Hey, Logic. I'm sorry, Logic. Didn't we have that discussion about real estate? I think you and I had the same discussion.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, and I mentioned now and earlier today right on the phone with you today that what I expect to see is I expect to see some of these studios merged.
Yeah.
Because if they can cut the cost, like if they can cost cut, and I know everyone hates that word, but they need to cut costs. If they can cost cut $1 billion out of that expenditure section, they are over 13% profitable, back to operating income profit margin. They're back to where they were 7, 8 years ago when they were like riding it really high. And 12 to 13% of 30 to 40 billion is a lot higher than 12 to 13% of 15 to 20 billion in terms of actual dollars in hand. And what it does is it lifts them over that lip or over that hurdle they currently have, where anytime they have a operating income that drops below 6 or 7%, they start to have to borrow money to be able to fund their production and development. That has not got a long-term sustainability model in mind. That is a short-term foreign exchange and a couple of other localized impact solutions. So their cash flow looks great because they borrowed a shitload of money on short-term facilities. If they need to pay that stuff back quickly, and that's what impacts their operating income. But they've got to sort that out in a more medium to long-term venture, which means they've got to put another $1 billion or $2 billion back in the bottom end. And it's not the bottom line at operating income. They've got to put it back in the bank account. Last year, they sucked. PlayStation alone sucked $3.2 billion out of their bank accounts just to function. And they haven't put any back in this year. They're still sucking money out of the bank account. That's why they've got such high short-term debts. And that's why that story that came out that said Nintendo's sitting on a pile of cash, Sony's excluded because it's got debt. Yeah, Sony's always got debt, but they've got huge amounts of short-term borrowings at the moment. They don't have a huge amount of money sitting freely for whatever. And it's predominantly PlayStation that's causing that issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
you cut 1,000 people out. I'm sorry I sound so cold when I talk about this. I've always advocated for find a way of doing the cost cutting without losing people, because it has a detrimental impact. Most of these big companies, like you just listed out, the CEOs, they don't necessarily have direct line of sight to these individuals, but they are the ones that sign off on these packages. They're the ones that sign off on these programs, but they're just looking at numbers. It's the senior management and the line management that are going to wear it, that have to go through this process. And some of them are getting sacked themselves. Some of them have been laid off. So that not only do they have to go and tell their team that they're no longer required, they've then got to front up to a meeting after that and go, hey, by the way, you're not required either. So it's heartbreaking stuff at times. But if they're talking mid to long-term solution restructure, outlook with an immediate short-term cash requirement, you don't have too many places you can go other than not using contractors or not buying stuff outside of your labor. And if you can consolidate your labor force into focusing on high-value projects and trim out the ones that are falling under the ROI requirements on the risk profiles, then you'll put yourself immediately back into a position of meeting your profitability requirements and putting cash back in the bank account to then try again in 18 months, 2 years' time. Mm-hmm. And again, it's cyclical. This happens all the time. And it's not contained to just gaming. As I was saying the other day, the banking sector, the banking sector globally in the last 12 months have offloaded 250,000 employees. Not investments. This is just straight up transactional banking. 250,000 people gone. Those jobs aren't gone because there's a downturn or recession. Those jobs are gone because they're just not needed anymore. There's 250,000 people no longer got their jobs. And no one bats an eyelid. No one even talks about it. Where, a couple of thousand go here and 10,000 go there and 5,000 go here. And it's, it is significant. But it's, oil and gas has offloaded 400,000 people, or 400,000 jobs have come out of the oil and gas industry globally in the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. They've pretty much not rehired anyone since the downturn in 2020 when the oil price crashed with COVID.
Yeah.
And they're certainly not looking at increasing production and supply because why would they bother? They've found a way to balance their books to make decent profits at the output they've got. And if there's an increase in demand, well, there's no real increase in demand at the moment because of electric vehicles and other sustainable fuel requirements. Why would they bother increasing it? And that affects all transport. And you got the shit that's going on in Suez and Panama. Global freighting lines are in a disarray. People can't get stuff built. They can't get stuff moved.
You need to have your own like show. You need to be on like CNBC or something, like some kind of market watch.
But and those external factors relate to gaming because what is your plastic box made out of? Plastic. Where's the plastic come from? Oil out of the ground. Where does all your microchip shit come from? That all comes out of the ground too, and it needs to be freighted and transported and moved around the world multiple times before it ends up in your nice little plastic box under your TV. If that stuff's not moving, it's costing money sitting there. You got a massive container ship sits at berth. It costs you $250,000 a week to park one in Melbourne. Mm-hmm. It costs you $1 million a month to have it parked offshore, not at a berth, just offshore.
Yeah.
You park it in and start unloading it, and you're on about 80 grand a day plus unloading costs.
And the bean counters are looking at all those expenses, man.
Every cent,
and
that's why people
looking
say
at everything.
Yep. And then you look at what costs can now be passed through to consumers. I can't remember who did it recently. There's someone who's got a streaming service or some kind of subscription service, and there's an option if you want something. It's no longer standard. You've got to pay for it as an additional extra.
Amazon Prime.
It's Amazon Prime, but it's not advertising. It's not removing advertising. It's something else. And the second I saw it, I went, "Oh, great! Subscription services and streaming services are now up to cost throughputs to consumer." And the wife goes, "What the hell does that mean?" I said, "Well, you want something, you pay. They'll get it for you, and charge you cost plus percentage." And whatever else for you to have it. They don't just spread it out across everyone. It's now become specific for you. And did you see the thing about surge pricing at fast food shops the other day?
Oh, at Wendy's. Yeah, Wendy's is going to test surge pricing starting next year. They're going to during peak business hours, the cost of a burger is going to be more expensive.
Yep.
Well, Brad, that's just proof that fast food is unsustainable. And Wendy's should move to put the triple, the double, and their single burger at multiple restaurants, and put their burgers on more platforms.
Hey, more burgers.
That's the solution to the platform.
More burgers everywhere. Everyone wins.
When we all eat together, we all win.
We all eat together, we all get sick. The problem will be our but this is another strategy of how do we deal with an economic environment that consumers just want value and they don't want to do anything else, or they want bottom dollar minimum value proposition. The surge pricing started by, I don't know if it was started by Uber, but it was made famous by Uber. Now they employed in fast food. I guarantee you that the workers aren't going to get an increase in their pay packets when surge pricing kicks in. I also guarantee you that they're not going to have additional stuff on hand to cover the surge when it kicks in. If anything, they'll go to whatever we have them in Australia. I imagine you have them in America. Self-service kiosks where you walk up to a big touch screen, bang in your order, hit the go button. So
McDonald's has those. I don't think Wendy's does here. Yeah. We're good, yeah.
Well, we've got McDonald's, Burger King, and now a lot of other fast food chains in Australia are starting to do that. But that technology is being made available to any fast food or any restaurant. Basically, I can walk into the one down the corner from where I live. I can order it on my app, tell them when I'm going to pick it up, and go and pick it up. They don't actually need someone at the front counter. So it's technology impacts across industries, but because it's coming through so fast, it's having an impact. And that's a terrible example to link back to, but linking it back to gaming, that's what's happening. We've got all these technology advancements, AI and all assisted bits and pieces and all that, where an AI function can run through and do your quality control, or it can help you do your community management or your VFX tidy ups and all the rest of that. It's not replacing an entire team, it's replacing part of that team. And now the individuals that are left have a tool that they can do that work with in a much faster and more effective manner, and it costs a shitload less than having people sitting there doing it. And the productive time is increased tenfold. And then if you need more people, you go and get contractors, because then the big companies are only paying for the productive time. This is the big issue that not just the gaming, but all industries are facing, is people don't want to work as much as they used to. Fair enough, work-life balance is important. But as a company, as a manager, as an organization, even small, big, doesn't matter what size, you need to be able to produce stuff. You need people working. And if you can only get your productive hours out of an individual being somewhere around 20 or 30%, you're always going to be behind. And they're always going to be the first thing that goes on the chopping block.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Falky. And to your point about, the impact of what we're seeing in other industries, I mean, that's true. I think a lot of people just aren't aware of that's happening. It's not just isolated to the gaming industry right now. I want to grab one more super chat here. Bulwer Country with a $5 super chat says, McConnell retired, yay. The client started with the PC shift. No matter what, Apple will never give Pixel 8 iMessage. Nobody talks about the negatives. Thank you for that super chat, Bulwer. I appreciate it. The other thing I wanted to talk about too, one of the things that I've been seeing is the notion that this means that Sony PlayStation is going to go day and date now.
Fuck off.
Okay, let me finish here. And actually, and the other thing that I see too is that, I think you mentioned this earlier, Logic, is that video games consoles are in decline. Now, I think one of the things that Matt Piscatella mentioned is that it's a mature market, which I don't disagree with him, but I don't think it's net zero growth either. It's just not growing as much as some of the other gaming markets. But I also don't think that means that the consoles are going to be going away anytime soon. It's just that and I said this, I think on the BRAP rant, I think essentially what's happened, and if you look at what Microsoft's pivot recently, is that you have two dominant players in that space, and there's just only a finite group of people that are going to buy gaming consoles. I don't think that's not different from other consumer products that have a finite group of people that are going to buy that product. But I've seen that too, that consoles are going to go the way of the dodo bird again. I don't think that's the case anytime soon. Who knows what happens, 15, 20, 30 years from now. But the other but back to the PC day and date thing. That's something that I've seen people saying is going to happen. Day date's going to come because Sony needs to make extra money. It just makes sense. More games everywhere. I'm going to go to you, B. What are your thoughts? I don't know if you've seen some of that dialogue discourse, but what are your thoughts? Do you think that this means that PlayStation may start looking at day and date?
No. People who are saying this are just idiots. Complete idiots. They cannot cannibalize their console because that's where they make the most money at. It's their biggest business. The second they start going day and date, similar to what happened to Xbox, is more people move away from the console. They go into another storefront, purchase their games there. Guess what? Sony loses out. That means no PlayStation Plus, no additional store sales, no additional revenue from accessories. All that is lost. Going day and date will be detrimental to their PlayStation business. There's a reason why they keep saying the same thing over and over again. Multiplayer games will be there day and date. We now know that they have canceled some of the games as a service titles. So there will be few. I think they announced there will be 6 by end of 2026. So we have one technically right now with Helldivers, but No, going day and date with all their titles is not something they're going to do because it would be detrimental to the business. And you talk about not having high margins of profitability right now. Doing that would tank that all the way to the bottom. It would totally kill off that business. So I don't see them doing it.
Yeah, it would kill them.
Yeah, go ahead, Falky. I knew you had some exciting words to say. You shouted out. I think there was an F-bomb somewhere there, but.
Sorry, I keep forgetting that and I apologize if you get demonetized. I keep forgetting that YouTube doesn't like particular. Well, actually, I should put a charge in against YouTube because colourful language is part of a certain number of countries' cultural.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Way of expressing ourselves.
Yeah.
So. In
my culture, we drop a lot of s this and son of a this and f that. Yeah, but go ahead, man.
No, I just agree with what B was just saying. It's just idiotic. Sorry, I'm struggling with words today. It's bloody stupid that people would think that they would just cut it off. And how much more crystal clear does it need to be coming through from the people that are responsible for making the decisions that keep saying, this is exactly what we're going to do. We've committed it to writing multiple times. We've stated it publicly multiple times. We can't be any more clearer than if it's a multiplayer game, likely get a PC release the same day as a console release. However, everything else is not day and date. And it's pretty fucking straightforward. And people would then reference back saying, oh, but Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond got up on that podcast and said the same thing. Like, they double spoke so much and just flatly did not clarify so many things. And Nintendo does it more often than not as well. They won't be crystal clear of exactly what's going to happen with particular games or particular services or software or whatnot. Try and get a straight answer out of Nintendo about how many Nintendo 64 games or how many Game Boy games are going to end up on their service, or whether that service is going to be compatible with the next Switch. You'll never get a straight answer out of them. They don't want to tell you. But in terms of this PC expansion piece, PlayStation's got a formula that works well. It returns ridiculously good in ROI for everything they've done so far, with the exception of the 2 games where they decided to completely rebuild them for the PC release. Those things suffered a little bit. I think they got their hands burnt, so they figured it out. But in terms of an aggressive expansion into PC and mobile and cloud and metaverse, we know that they've got mobile game-specific studios that have remained untouched from this restructure. We know that they've got cloud infrastructure that they've been spending big dollars on that has remained untouched from this restructure. And they've been carrying it for a little while. They haven't touched any of those areas. And then probably not going to either, based on what they're telling us, because that's the focus point, is console first, big traditional games, single player experiences. We're dabbling in the live service stuff. And, they said, started with 10, went out to 12, and now it's back to 6. That's not unusual when you're trying something new in terms of a project. We always knew they were going to probably lose a third of those games along the way because they just weren't going to stack up. But you got to try. You can't put all your eggs in a basket of 1 or 2 games and then hope and pray and carry on, or you get something that looks like Skull and Bones. Takes forever to build it, and when it finally shows up, it's no good. So, yeah, they're just salty. Whatever.
Yeah. So, go ahead, Logic.
So Machine XP asked in the chat, please tell me what aggressive push for PC means. As a lot of articles are kind of around saying, the quote by Hiroki Totoki was first of all, in many cases misquoted, in many cases taken out of context. I'm going to pick this one, although there are lots of these that are wrong, but I'm going to go with this one for right now. So the quote was, so Machine XP was asking aggressive push for PC. I just want to state, just as a starter, the quote was, another driver will be first-party titles, strong titles that achieve growth on PS5, PCs, and other platforms will widen our margins. Those are two separate sentences. Third sentence, we believe that we have opportunities for margin improvement and intend to pursue them aggressively. So I think those 3 or 4 sentences were intermixed in a way that comes out with aggressive push for PC. Undoubtedly, there was definitely a messaging in there that there was going to be effort in putting games on PC and mobile, but those aren't new statements. We've heard that statement before in but in mid 2021 or 2022, Jim Ryan came out with a statement about their games going to PC. Herman Hulst then followed up with an interview that fall to clarify what Ryan had said, because Ryan typically tends to be very ham-fisted in the way he states things. But if everybody remembers the whole PlayStation community fallout about, oh my God, games are going to PC, they're not focused on the console anymore. And Herman Hulst came out and tried to calm everyone down and said, look, games are going to go to console first. Games are eventually going to come to PC. You're going to see a shortening of the length of time that it takes them to come to PC. Right now, we generally put them on PC every 2 years, or 2 years after they launch on console. You will probably see that shorten over time. And so at that point, most of the kind of, feelings about, most people kind of looking at it and interpreting that was that we were going to see at best things maybe close up to about a year. Last, I think, mentioned in the chat, but the hardware is not profitable. So back in damn it, I just lost the date on this. Back in 2021, back in August of 2021, Sony reported that the PlayStation 5 hardware, that they were making a profit on that it was no longer being sold at a loss. So that was for the digital version of the console. Remember the digital version that they have also just raised prices on by $50. So they are making more profit for each one of those that's sold. And then you would also expect that in 3 years hence, that we're probably at a point where the disk drive based version is probably also not selling at a loss. So the question that was asked about how does that mean? No, Last, I'm reading. God damn it. I'm reading the quote right here. The name of the article is Sony's $499 PS5 is no longer selling at a loss. So that's the quote. You can interpret that however you choose to interpret it. But the point is the question is being asked, how does moving their games to day and date on PC, how does that negatively impact the hardware business? The point is, and it's a piece that often gets left out of these conversations, that particularly in this day and age, it's not like it's a new concept. It's a basic law of economics that we all supposedly learn when we're in high school. There are things that consumers take into account called opportunity costs. And that means that even if you have the money, you don't always necessarily spend the money on an extra or redundant thing if it prevents you from doing something else. And so if you take availability for a piece of software and you move it to where it is accessible via 2 platforms, there are going to be some of your consumers who are going to choose to not buy the 2 access paths. And so some of those people are going to say, I no longer need a PlayStation 5 because I also already have a PC. And that gets you to be money statement. And the same thing that BRAP is selling. That piece of hardware, that PlayStation 5 piece of hardware, is not just a conduit for them to access one game that's concurrently being deployed to PC. It is also a conduit by which they also buy controllers. Controllers which happen to be the highest selling accessory generally on any given month that you see MPD results. The high-end controller, the DualSense Edge, has also been charting on MPD as the highest sold controller. Then you talk about all of this other additional software that they buy through that console, because a person isn't going to probably sign up for PlayStation Plus via their PC, but they will sign up for it via the console. Then you talk about the apps that are available and accessible on that console. Those apps aren't sitting on there at no cost. Those apps aren't sitting on there via no contractual arrangement between Sony and HBO and Peacock and all the other people that put apps on there. Those apps aren't sitting there with no royalty arrangement or some other type of arrangement between Sony and the app providers for the frequency and the amount of use that those apps incur. So there's multiple revenue streams, multiple revenue tributaries that cut through that console. And again, if those games become available on PC on day and date, then a lot of that is going to be cut off, and then you're going to get that cannibalization. Now the thing that some people purport is that, well, but they'll sell more games on PC and make up for the loss of the console. So the thing that has to be considered is they have to sell a certain amount of games per every person that would have bought a console, along with whatever attach rate of software and accessories and their deals in apps. And then you also have to consider that if they're cannibalizing their hardware business and they're not selling as many consoles, that also has an impact to the volume discounts that they get for the procurement of raw materials and also for manufacturing of the consoles. So there are all types of negative impacts. That's not to say that it will never happen, or even, quite frankly, I don't even care if you believe that it won't happen. But my point is that those are all the variables that have to be taken into consideration, the math that has to be calculated to arrive at a conclusion that that's the smart thing to do. And to date, nobody has shown me that math. Nobody's built for me or shown me a mathematical model that tells me that it's more profitable for them to put the games on PC day and date. As someone also mentioned in the chat, it's also more level of effort in terms of engineering hours. You're going to need a larger software team, development team, to concurrently do parallel development to handle putting that game on PC. You're going to have additional troubleshooting. You're going to have additional bugs. PlayStation 5, as I've mentioned multiple times, PlayStation doesn't build on top of the same abstraction layer that you utilize on PC. On PC, you sit on DirectX. On PlayStation, you sit on a proprietary abstraction layer that's built in-house in Sony. And then you're gonna have to manage all of that, right? Then you're gonna have the operations tail that's associated with it, where you're gonna have to do bug squashing and patching and putting out updates for the game concurrently, right, for your PC player base and your PlayStation player base, none of which they do now, right? There's a lag. So there's time for them to contend with those things in a way that's not as cost impactful as doing it concurrently. So maybe it's feasible. I don't know. I've done the math that shows that math comes out as a negative. I haven't seen anybody show me the math that tells me that it's a positive and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, like, and one of the things I'm seeing, like, I just saw this. This is kind of the dialogue that I'm seeing. I just saw in the live chat. It was survey saying software selling on more platforms is better than a tiny profit on hardware. Faki, what do you say to that? As Logic's talking about the math as it relates to the PlayStation business.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, he said, some of the live chat says software selling on more platforms is better than a tiny profit on hardware.
But just before Falky jumps in, I want to go back to what I just said. What I just said is that the cost of goods sold to distribute that software on multiple platforms, it's not just a button you push and out it pops, right? It's not code once, run everywhere. There's an additional level of effort, and so therefore there's an additional cost of goods sold, and therefore that product takes you more money, more engineers, more level of effort, more fringe benefits for all those full-time employees, right? For you to get it onto multiple platforms, and then you have an operations tail associated with it. One thing that I don't know why I don't get this, but another thing to take into consideration and just think about is that when you invest the capital and the R&D to what I said, yeah, right, last, they do have the math and they're not doing what you claim that they're doing. That's my point. Right. So the other thing to take into consideration is that when you invest the upfront capital, and just my point is, we're also not going to do the prove the null hypothesis, because you have an absence of complete knowledge and you're not omniscient. You therefore can't assert that there's any assumption or a hypothesis or a theory that you could state. We don't do that here. We don't hold that type of conversation. So if that's the type of conversation you need, that would probably say, probably hold it somewhere else. But last, I also just said the same thing. I said, I'm not asserting that it's absolutely impossible. What I just said is that no one has walked the dog and shown me the math and given me a model, even a hypothetical one, to have a discussion around that establishes that this is the right thing to do. They have only done kind of what you're doing now, which is make an assertion that that's the right thing to do. So what I was trying to say is, the other thing I'll say is, one thing to consider is that when you make the upfront investment for a console and then you put it on the market, right? The longer that console is on the market, the longer, in fact, that life cycle continues, the more upside it is. Gradually over time, manufacturing becomes cheaper. Gradually over time, you eventually depreciate your upfront capital investment. Gradually over time, every unit of that console that you sell is upside. Software is the opposite. You make an investment, you sell software, and the longer you sell software, the less money you make on every increment of a unit that you sell, because it eventually gets discounted. So that's just another thing to think about what the difference in how those two value streams look to a corporation when they're making those decisions.
Which is why live service software is so appealing in terms of constant cash flow for some organizations, and why they pursue it so heavily.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you, Falky. Great points, Logic. But Falky, back to that question I had, and I love your reaction. I mean, this is part of the conversation. More games everywhere is better than, getting more software is better than getting, tiny bit of revenue off of software sold on your hardware.
Yeah,
how does that
two
math
totally
look?
different points. How does it look? Horrible for PlayStation. It looks really attractive for Xbox because they're in two very different circumstances. In terms of, if they're negligible on the hardware, then, and let's say for the purposes of the example I'm about to give, that PlayStation is break even on the hardware. Everything going out the storefront is making them money. Great. If they then say, right, well, we're going to uproot our core model and shift it to be day and date with PC, which not only means all of our first party stuff goes down the tank, goes down the toilet, because we would need to, God of War as an example, or God of War Ragnarok as an example, did 11 million within the first month or something stupid like that. They would need to sell, when you work out that Steam, so if they don't have their own PC launcher, they would need to sell 14, 15 million copies in the same time frame. And that's just on the revenue side. That's not factoring in the costs associated with getting a PC build done there. So you're probably looking at another 15 to 20% increase in costs. You're not going to see that margin expanding that greatly. So now we're somewhere around 17 million units just to do the same thing as what they've done with 10 million on their console. So, is there an appetite on the PC market to take that game up? Sure as hell doesn't seem like it when you look at what Spider-Man and The Last of Us PC releases and all that. They're not exactly banging out 5, 6, 7, 8 million copies of some pretty top end PlayStation games. So, and I don't understand why this fascination with PC exists. It's not like the PC gaming market is expanding in terms of users. It might be growing and expanding in terms of revenue as a percentage of the everything, but it's not the users that's going up.
By the way, Falky, it's also not, people also skate by this one fact with PC. Not everyone has a PC rig that can play the type of first party games that Sony's putting on PC.
Right. Well, look, we've seen the comparisons and they're up and down, and depending on which side of the coin you're looking at it. To get a PC that can do what a PlayStation 5 or even an Xbox can do, you somewhere around the $2,000. Like 4 times the cost of what one of these things is, or 3 times the cost of what one of these consoles is to get a PC that can do it. And then you need, you're constantly looking at having to upgrade it. And it's an option. If people go into PC gaming because they like the hardware piece, the software piece, that's because that's what they like to do. There's an awful lot of people who just want to sit on a couch, pick up a controller, press the start button, and start shooting the shit out of whatever it is. Or start enjoying whatever the story is that they're playing through, or go and slash the crap out of someone. It's everyone to their own seat. So the options are there. But what PlayStation is doing is not trying to spread themselves so thin that it erodes their revenue base and it erodes and increases their costs. And the numbers that they would have to do if they went day and date with everything on PC would be more than to just remain at the level they're currently at, let alone get to the level they want to be at. They'd have to almost double their output on everything. And that's not looking at third-party titles where they would be surrendering huge amounts of dollars.
So, hey, guys in the chat, some of you guys, I think, are on your jump to conclusions with that. So, first of all, Falky is in Australia. So, when he's talking about prices, he's talking about things from the Australian optic. So, a lot of you guys are jumping in to assumptions, probably based on a U.S. perspective or a U.S. view. Also, when you talk about running the types of games that are on a PlayStation 5 and running them efficiently and running them with no frame rate drops and running them at the max capabilities of a PlayStation 5, which includes running at 4K 120 for some of their titles, you're not talking about an entry-level rig. And that's not just because of power, but that's because of optimization. And that's another one of the things that we're talking about here, why day and date isn't the slam dunk that people think that it is.
Not because with the levels that PlayStation are currently at.
Right, because you nobody called you a dumbass, and I'm really doing the best I can to remain super patient with you. But if you keep it up, I'm just going to make a personal request to BRAP to put you in timeout at a minimum. So, and I'm not explaining things just for you. I'm explaining things for the benefit of the other people in the audience. So the games that arrive on PlayStation can have the potential to be better optimized for that hardware because the developers are only focused on that as a singular target. And so when you talk about putting games on PC, you're not necessarily going to gain that efficiency in production pipeline and your development pipeline. You're going to have much larger variants. You're going to have, therefore, additional engineering level of effort. And again, PCs do a lot of what they do, not simply based on a lot of the power that comes in a PC and a lot of what they're able to do isn't necessarily because of elegant coding from the development side, but it's also just because of brute force, right? And so part of the things and part of the problem with the PC when you talk about cost is you wind up buying a lot of capability that, quite frankly, you don't use all the time. And so at the end of the day, in order to have a PC that is capable of running everything for a PlayStation game at a level of efficiency and a level of effectiveness that is concurrent with PlayStation 5, again, you're not buying an entry-level rig, is the point.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you guys running through that math, because that's something that, for whatever, I've, Falky, not Falky, but Logic, you and I have been having a conversation with someone, and that for whatever reason, that person seems to just turn a blind eye to the math part. Like we say, the math needs the math, and again, I mean, I don't think anyone here is saying that they would never do it, but I think to your point, Logic, where you talked about, there have to be some kind of replacement to that lost revenue. And I know you've given examples of like what Apple did with the iPod to the iPhone. There was another example you gave. Oh shoot, what was the other example you gave? I don't remember. There was another. It was Apple and
Samsung?
No, it wasn't Samsung. Oh, we talked about Nintendo. How Nintendo cannibalized their two lines of business to make the Switch. And by doing that, they made more money. I think that's where it would make sense for Sony. Recoup that lost revenue, and in doing so, make even more money than they were in the console space. But I don't see that. I don't see that happening. Well, yeah, go ahead, Falky.
Well, just think about the volume you're talking about, not in terms of percentages or dollars or anything. Just think about the volume of units they would have to shift just to stay where they are. It's not like they're trying to. It's not like they're trying to curb a reducing revenue stream, or they're trying to fix an issue with not being able to sell stuff. The two issues that they have, one of them is first-party release schedules aren't anywhere near where they need to be. That's not a fast 5-minute fix. That's going to take a little bit of rework and a bit of reconcentration. And if that means that the secondary projects get put on hold for the primary ones to get out the door, all but consumers care about right now is when's the next Naughty Dog game coming? When's the next Santa Monica game coming? Give me the next one out of that studio. I don't care if the next one after that's only 2 years away afterwards. I haven't seen one come out of there for a while. Gimme, gimme, gimme. And that's what they need to fix in terms of that releasing cadence. The other thing is that they've got too much costs on board. They've got to offload some cost. Sort those two problems out, and it's back to happy days. Xbox is a totally different kettle of fish. They've now got a huge amount of cost that's exceeding what they can carry in a market that they can't really sell anywhere near the volume that they need to on their, because they can't get their console sales up and running. And their console base isn't big enough to support it. They need to double their console base to be able to just have that support level. It's a sad fact. I wish it was higher, but unfortunately, that's where it's turned out to be with the business policies that they've put in place. So they've got to find a way of getting their software out to other people, because they've got that many studios and that much software now with Activision and Blizzard and King and Bethesda and all the ZeniMax ones and all the internal ones. They've got to be able to find some way of getting revenue in for it, because the console base isn't big enough. PlayStation's a totally different kettle of fish. Same with Nintendo. Their console base is fine. They could put off the Switch 2 for another 18 months if they wanted to, and just wheel out another rehash of Pokemon and Mario and something else, and they'll make another couple of $1 billion profit, no dramas. So they're not in a hurry to need to do anything either, because the base is there that's supporting it. But, you know, if this whole notion that if Xbox takes everything to every screen, well, they've been talking about doing that for years, and they're primarily situated where they need to sell the software, and they need to sell a lot of it quickly, because their hardware function just isn't able to support itself. So it's in an almost inverse situation. So, and it's asinine to compare the two of them. They're in totally different aspects, and the PlayStation solutions are far easier to do. They're not necessarily nice, but they're far easier to do by cost reduction than trying to find a way of making more money.
Mm-hmm.
Hey guys in the chat, back to the PC versus PS5. So it's up to you. I'll put this to you. In general, what I will say is, if somebody comes to me and asks me to build a PC, I am not going to recommend them to get a $1,000 PC, because I know that they're going to wind up needing to upgrade it here shortly, unless they are an absolute bargain basement person who doesn't give a shit about performance. So the realistic scenario is that a person procuring a PC, you're probably going to tell them to target around $1,500, maybe with a little bit of that right on discount for a sale. The other thing is that even if they buy $1,000, they're still spending more than they would spend for a $500 console. And I don't disagree with you. Jesus. I don't disagree with you. Anybody who spent more than 5 minutes listening to this show knows that pretty much everyone here on the show is that. What am I wrong about last? What is the problem? Jesus Christ!
Oh my God! This is so. I don't like. Why?
Am I wrong? Am I wrong that you wouldn't recommend a $1,500? Like again, how am I wrong about what I just said? My own recommendation to a person would be, right? Or that they would probably need to upgrade their PC in short order if they went with a $1,000 PC.
Oh my God!
Yes, if you buy an entry level PC with a crappy GPU for $1,000, in my opinion, you're going to need to upgrade that PC. I would say in 2 years' time.
Yeah,
with a better GPU.
With a better GPU. I mean, you look at I remember coming off when I built the PC I have now. I mean, what was the minimum RAM configuration? Was 16 gigs or something, or 32? I forget.
Well, last. So first of all, last, you're talking about 6800 buying an AMD Radeon. I'm not telling a person buying their first PC to go with an AMD card, because I run AMD cards and they are not as dead ass simple as running an NVIDIA GPU. Now, again, that probably comes down to personal preference. I don't know. It's up to you. I don't really care. I think we've talked about what we've talked about. If you disagree, then you disagree.
To add to that, though, if you're gonna get it, and I'm not watching the chat, but just hearing this, if you're gonna argue into semantics right down to an individual perspective point, you're completely missing the broad picture that's at play here. C-suite executives couldn't give a rat's ass about what your one particular setup is. They're looking at broad. They're looking at broad consumer bases. They don't care if it's AMD, Intel, or whatever it is. What they care about is how much does it cost for us to put this thing onto a platform that has got multiple different instances, and we have to pick a minimum for it to run at. So as soon as we start picking a minimum to run at, we're dropping out potential buyers of our product. They get nervous at that point. You look at what happened with Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. The thing took a while for them to get that port done, and then when the specs came out, it was limiting it to basically top-end rigs that were $2.5 to $3,000 plus, just to get the thing to run. If you wanted it to run at the same top-end specs, you were looking at a $5,000 or $6,000 unit, and that's restrictive in terms of the amount of people who are going to buy it is drastically reduced. Now you want to talk about day-and-date PC. If you're limiting it to those with particular rigs, as Logic has said, you need at least a rig at this point just to be able to play it, let alone play it well. You've got to upgrade it all the time or get the higher end. C-suite executives and those that are in charge of making these decisions aren't interested in going into what's yours versus the guy next to you. They're interested in what is my target pool of potential buyers and what's the average percentage of uptake on these particular games from the analytics within that pool. Is it worth doing or not? And if it comes back that it's not worth doing, they won't do it. Simple as that.
Well, we're also making arguments like because the PS5 runs an AMD GPU, then it should be fine running an AMD GPU on a PC. Totally skating by the fact that the person who runs it on PC is going to have to deal with drivers and adrenaline and all the things that, in my perspective, are a pain in the ass to deal with an AMD GPU. But yeah, you're right. Let's end the arguing and move on. I know how to take care of this as far as the source of the problem.
This is a very interesting conversation that you guys are having here.
No, it's not. It's not Forte. It's not Forte. We're getting a lot of no. It's not an interesting argument.
Oh no! I wish there was a midnight. I had inventory tonight. I wish there was a midnight so I could have been playing Final Fantasy like in the next hour, in 10 minutes. I wish.
If you've been listening to our TED Talk for the last 2 hours.
Oh man, I've been listening. I was in the car like, wow. Okay.
And you got Pierce Taylor. You got Pierce Taylor in here like a child dropping smiley face emojis because he's jumping on drivers are so hard to update. The point isn't about drivers being hard to update. The point is that, in my opinion, from the time and experience that I've had running an AMD Radeon GPU, it is not as dead simple as running an NVIDIA GPU.
Hey, Forte,
keep making disingenuous arguments in the chat, guys.
Hey, Forte, doesn't JD Gamer live in your neighborhood, man?
Is he? Yeah, it's my homie. He's good. He's good.
He seems like he's a little out there.
No, he's fine.
No. So last man, stop arguing. You're just wrong. No, I'm not last. I'm not wrong. Oh. Running a GPU in a PC is a pain in the ass in comparison to an NVIDIA GPU. You have to do a lot more manual intervention with it than you do have to do with an NVIDIA GPU. Period. Wait, Forte, you're the one who's wrong.
Forte, are you sure he's okay?
He is okay. He's fine.
He says some wild shit, man.
He does it all the time though, and we talk about that. We have our in-person TED Talk every once in a while when he comes into the store, so we're good. He's fine.
Is he the guy? The video that said something about PlayStation 5's overheating or something, and Xbox gonna have games? Was that him?
No. Oh, you know the one where he was there when that guy said that. The one that traded his PlayStation in. So, I mean, as much as I hate to say it, a person came in the store and got rid of their PlayStation and said those things in front of him. And I was like, oh, Lord, here we go.
I thought that was
here
JD.
We go.
Sounds like something JD would say.
No, JD just happened to be there when that guy came in. Just a random dude just came into the store.
Forte, you need to have a sit down with JD.
No, JD, fine. Leave him alone, man. Listen, I'm going to tell you this.
You need to have a chat with him, man.
Listen, I'm going to tell you this. And it might be the most rudimentary thing that we ever say here. Everybody doesn't know what the real performance of PC is. Like, everybody they see the specs and they'll say, oh, this is equivalent to that. Like, people are saying that the PlayStation 5 is an equivalent to a 3040. Okay, a 3040. I have a 3070 Ti, by the way.
You should have upgraded like Slow-Mo. He did the right thing.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, Nvidia's not getting me for the level of effery that they're charging people right now for these graphics cards. It's not happening. But listen, I have a 3070. I have an AMD. I have an AMD platform, 5950X. Now that motherboard and processor combo, the motherboard by itself cost me $450. I have a Asus, a Dark Hero. What's the name? I forget what the name of it is, but it was $450 for the motherboard by itself. The CPU was $700 when it came out. $700 running the 3070 Ti with 32 gigs of RAM, and it's a beast. And guess what? When I turn on Battlefield 2042 and max it out, guess how many frames I get? I get 77 frames on average. And I'm like, okay. But then Slow-Mo goes out there and gets 110 with his 4080 Super. And I'm sitting there like, okay, but you got consoles that run that game at 120 FPS. Now, the thing that people don't realize, it might be lower texture quality and stuff, but for the majority of people that are playing games, they don't care. As long as the experience is smooth and it's a pleasant viewing experience, I don't think anybody will, look at a game like Horizon Forbidden West and say that game looks horrible on console compared to the PC version, because the PC version looks better, but it runs just as good as the console version. Now, can you go even higher on a PC? Absolutely. You got an unlimited budget on PC, but the experience of playing on a console, nobody's going to want to play on a PC at $1,000. $1,000 PC is going to get you in the door, but your person that's playing on PC, you're getting into it because you want the extra performance. You don't want minimum.
I gotta ask Falky quick. Falky, do we know what Xbox's profit margins are right now?
What the hell do they have profits? Do they? Do they have profits?
Well, not flash. They're not positive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, they're no good. They're no good. They're Sorry, I'm just trying to think of a diplomatic way to answer that.
Are you trying to? Are we trying to separate the profit of Xbox away from the profits of Microsoft? Because that's where that conversation goes. Microsoft is profitable, but
your buddy's saying that PlayStation wishes they had Xbox's profit margins. That's why I'm asking the question.
Oh man.
Xbox wishes they were in as bad a situation as PlayStation is at the moment. Xbox's profit margins, it's like high negatives. It's last best estimate, because you got to fiddle these things a bit because they won't tell you straight out. The last best estimate where they were down like $3.5 billion.
Wow.
Year to date, and that was that was their half year. They were down about close to $3 billion to the half year mark.
Okay.
Yeah. And guess what? It probably would have been more if they didn't add in.
You got to talk.
It probably would have been more if they didn't add in ABK over the last quarter.
You need to have a TED Talk, man, or something.
No, I'm not. He's fine. Listen. He is having fun right now because he has you going back and forth in the chat. Listen, he's a legit troll. I love him, and that's who he is. And he's going to keep doing this to you because you are giving him the attention.
All right. Well, then then he's not doing that.
Yeah, the last thing I want to mention on the PC talk is
okay. But you know what though? That's not excuse.
JD, I love you. I love you. Well, he's not being disrespectful or anything. That's just he was being
disrespectful earlier.
I have to see that. I've never seen him be disrespectful. If he's being disrespectful, JD, you got to stop being disrespectful. I can't come in. You can't come into my store and have 40-minute conversations and we talk about all these people that's in the community. Because we talk about a lot of bad people in this community.
If you come in here and you're dishonest and disingenuous, that's being disrespectful. I said it on Twitter the other day, and I'll say it again. Yes, there are going to be times.
It's not all like that's not.
No, but okay, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you.
Just mention it. There are times that I'm going to be wrong, and when I am proven wrong, and somebody walks the dog and shows me that math, I will say that I'm wrong. But what I do not do is I do not come in here and I am not deliberately dishonest and I am not deliberately disingenuous. Last thing I'll mention on this PC discussion, the PC discussion also skated by the fact that we're not including in the conversation that 99% of the time that somebody buys a console instead of a PC is because they want a push button appliance that has a simplified experience because they don't feel like farkling around with all the stuff that they have to bother with a PC. And people who are in the chat are the same people that I had the argument with about the Steam Deck. And we're saying, oh, well, PCs are simple. They're easy. They're not that big a deal. I get that. I'm a PC gamer. But the problem is that is not the impression that other consumers normally have.
Yeah, let me grab some super chats here real quick. Machine XP with the $10 super chat. $10 super chat says, this was a good combo. Some arguing, but it was a good combo. Thanks, Logic and Rest. Yeah, look, I look, if that's trolling Forte, like that's just I don't.
Listen.
No. Hold on, wait. I no, it's not fine. I don't think it's fine at all.
No, I'm just saying.
I don't have patience for it. Like be an adult. Like don't come and podcast and troll and be disingenuous to get a rise out of people. That's actually pretty fucking rude.
Well, I don't think. Well, listen, I don't think you did this. No. Wait, hold on. Wait, hold on. We can't. Okay, we can't say because. Okay, listen. You want to be one track about it and think about it one way. I think about it because everybody's not as educated as like some people will literally believe what they're saying because they believe that's what the truth is.
Forte,
like
that's not my problem.
Listen, I know it's not, but that don't mean that a person is.
I'm not
that doesn't mean that
excuses.
We're not making excuses. I'm just saying, but it's not. It's just basically stating a fact that just because somebody doesn't have the same information that you have and they don't know exactly what you know, doesn't mean that they're being disrespectful or stupid. They're just misinformed to the situation that we're talking about.
Forte, when you when there's something called Google. I'm not
okay, and we tell a lot of people to use Google.
Let me just say something else too, though. Like,
I'm trying to save you, JD, and he ain't gonna let me do it.
No, because it's disingenuous and it drags down the conversation. Like, we don't do that on the show. You want to go to a DPS? I don't think DPS does that either. You guys don't do that either, but.
No, we don't.
You want to go to.
I just ignore JD if he came into the chat and doing the stuff like that for us. I just ignore him.
But we're not going to.
I'll leave it alone. It's fine. It's fine.
This is the thing too, though. And again, if you're misinformed or you didn't do the research or whatever, that's totally fine. You can come in here and have a conversation, and we can have a back and forth about it. What to me is unacceptable, though, is you trying to come over the top rope, like JD said, and said that analysis is wrong. What's wrong with that analysis? Right? These guys who are in the chat asserting that, again, you're wrong, you're way out, blah, 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 blah. Again, this is the problem that's been going on with the gaming conversation. Now I'm about to get on my soapbox. This is what the problem that's been going on with the gaming conversation for the last month, right? And a lot of the things that we're talking about here tonight, right? Yeah. And I'm going to give Machine XP a lot of props because what he did when we started talking about the Totoki quote is he said, hey, so genuine question, please explain to me what aggressive push to PC means. That's a great way to ask the question and have a conversation. The problem that's been going on here and on Twitter is people saying, no, this is what he said. He said he's going day and date on PC. And I'm like, dude, that's a disingenuous statement.
Well, he didn't say that.
Right. That's not verbatim what he said. That's your interpretation. Yeah. But that's the type of stuff that happens in a lot of these podcasts and a lot of people coming over the top rope. And it's because they want to troll, or it's a joke, or it's fun, or whatever. That's not the show, and we're not those people.
Well, that's mostly it's mostly due to the fact that people don't understand sentence structure.
I have 4 kids. I don't need to be like this. I
thought you had 5.
No, I have 4 kids, and
okay, we're being for real today.
And sometimes I hate this. I feel like a babysitter here sometimes.
Oh my God! No, that's because you're giving these people too much attention. But listen, you have literally made the last 5 minutes of this podcast about JD. I'm telling you right now, he's over there laughing at it. He's like literally mute. Well, he's not on the podcast. He's probably laughing like literally at the real podcast.
But again, but it's not funny.
Just let it be. It's not. Just let it. Enrique, let it go.
It's not fun. No, I'm not going to let it go. It's my show. I don't have to let it go.
Oh, okay, you're right. You're right. It is your show.
I don't. Like I don't have to let it go.
You're right. I'm sorry.
No,
you're right.
Saying,
you're
like,
right.
I'm just saying, like, this stuff, like, it's just not. This is not the kind of conversation dialogue that we have here on the show or in the chat. A lot of people in the chat understand this.
I know they do.
I mean,
a lot of people in the chat come over because they want to actually learn or they want to actually have a discussion about it.
Yeah, like, and I'm only picking on JD because you're like buddies with him, you know. But no, it's not cool. Like there's other. Shows
I know you are.
On.
I know. I'm just saying, I'm just saying at a certain point, and I told you, and that's the thing. I told you what it was. It's trolling. Just let it go.
Forte.
Look, man, I'm gonna be on DPS tomorrow. I'm gonna come over there. And
I know.
let
that's fine.
What it feels like.
And guess what? Our chat is going to put you in there, and our chat will put you in your place, and I'm good with it.
You know what? I'm gonna go in there and troll. I'm gonna agree with everything Slow Mo says. Go double.
And then I'm gonna
bring all the narratives.
And then I'm gonna take your mod status away if you do something like that.
That's fine. Take it away. That's okay. Slow Mo will give it back. Slow Mo will give it back to me.
He probably will if you agree with him all the time.
He probably would. You know he would.
No, but shout out though. It was a good discussion. I do think in general it's just a miscommunication of what people actually understand. Because the one thing about the show is it's high level thinking. It's not basically just throw crap against the wall and see what sticks. It's like you come here with facts. That's the one thing about BRAP that we all like. Facts are always spoken.
That's why if you can back up.
If you can speak, if you can actually come to the table with some factual information, like you said with the math, if the maths, then I'll listen to you. But if you can't even meet me halfway in a mathematical term when it comes to like what profitability and stuff looks like, I just don't pay you no attention at that point. Because at that point, what are you talking about? Like, you know, you're just talking your personal feelings. And once I get to a point where I feel like people are speaking their personal feelings versus what it actually is, you know, then that's when I kind of, you know, step away from that conversation. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you need to be, you know, like, oh, it's your show and everything. Yeah, it's your show. I know it. Thank you for letting me be a part of it too.
All right, let me grab these other super chats.
Pay the bills.
$5 super chat, Machine XP. Wait, my super chat was genuine. I wasn't trolling. No, we know you weren't trolling Machine XP.
Well, no, not him.
Yeah,
we're just talking about other people.
Yeah, but yeah, no. Look, it's 11:23. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth launches in like 37 minutes. So,
are you playing tonight?
I'm gonna try. I don't know. We'll see. I might play tonight. We'll see.
Guess what? It's not. Guess what? It's not on PC. So I mean, there's another reason why you should own a PlayStation.
Yeah, well, that's the only reason I own PlayStation is for their first party exclusives. If they went day and date on PC, I wouldn't even buy a PlayStation. I'd be gone. But anyhow, I want to give a big shout to most everyone in the live chat. Thank you all for hanging out with us this evening.
Let Falky. I want to hear what Falky was about to say before you close it out because he's about to say something.
Go ahead, Falky.
Sorry. I was just going to circle back to what we were discussing around the aggressive expansion into PC comment. So, Final Fantasy Rebirth is on PlayStation exclusive for 3 months till the end of May, I think it is. March, the end of May. So then, who's doing the PC publish? Is that coming through Square, or is PlayStation doing the publishing for that one? Because it'd be interesting to note who's doing the publishing for Death Stranding 2 on PC. Because remember, last time it was 505 Games.
Yes.
But this time there's a fair bit of chatter around it being PlayStation's doing the publishing for the PC version of that. So maybe that's part of that. Well, I shouldn't say maybe. That is part of their expansion into PC, is to be the publishing arm as well, because they did the publishing for Helldivers 2. So, and that as the publisher gets them a much bigger chunk out of the PC side of it. So they're not surrendering any revenue into the Steam and GOG and Epic. So there's something to consider, that their aggressive expansion is not necessarily just them putting first party games out on PC. There's other ways of making money out of being involved in PC.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I think we were going to get into that a little earlier, and I got sidetracked. And I apologize if I'm repeating anything that you mentioned, but yeah, the aggressive push to PC, which again wasn't really the quote, but being aggressive about getting margins up and putting games on other platforms can mean things like dipping into the backlog. Is one of the things that I think would be particularly interesting, and I think is a way to help them move money. Like, I think there are people who would play a Siphon Filter or a what is the game you guys always talk about? The Seals game.
Oh, SOCOM.
Yeah, I think I probably a bit of a PETA to pull off the multiplayer, but the notion of dipping into the back catalog and putting those games there and not just focusing on porting or like recent games of the current generation, I think would be a play that they could make. It could involve bringing another port studio online so that you can port games in parallel. So not necessarily get them faster than 12 months after they arrive on PlayStation 5, but get two of them on there at a time instead of just one, and other things like that. So just like Falky said, I think there's other ways to consider that they would be aggressive about getting their margins up and putting games on other platforms. Again, those were 2 or 3 different sentences, but
sure.
Other than just, I mean, and again, I'm not saying that day and date is impossible. The pushback I'm giving is that is the default that everybody is getting on their jump to conclusions mat and asserting that that's what he said. When as we've articulated, that is not verbatim what the man said. That is some people's interpretation. Everybody's interpretation comes through a lens and a bias that they have. Right, and that's not the only possibility. And we should acknowledge that in any business decision that needs to be made, there are 99 bajillion different possibilities, right, that get juggled. Typically, you lay them all out in COAs, and you do pros and cons, and you run the numbers of profitability, right, and you also look at long-term strategy and how it positions your corporation. And you typically don't just seize on one of those options and just roll down that hill full barrel, full tilt. Without doing the analysis. So,
yeah. One more question in the live chat here. Someone said he said ubiquitous. What does that mean?
I don't. So first of all, I think we're talking about 2 different interviews. I may be wrong, but one was Yoshida.
That was Yoshida, yeah, the CEO.
Right. Yeah. So when he, what I interpreted from what he meant from ubiquitous is that PlayStation will have presence on all of those platforms, not just on console. But what Yoshida said during that interview is that PlayStation would remain the core, and that the other things would then be add-ons. And so what I take from that is what I think personally is that yes, yea verily, there is going to be a day when you control a Nathan Drake on mobile. But that is starkly different from the scenario other people are painting, which is the leap to, hey, Uncharted 6 is going to launch day and date concurrently on mobile, PC, and PlayStation. That's a wildly different scenario, and that is the one that it seems people are jumping to.
And actually, in the Insomniac leak, Sony actually, in those leaks, it was Sony's opinions. Yeah, go ahead.
So Server, I know that's his quote. But it's still an interpretation if you're interpreting that as he is talking about a single experience in a single game expanding to PC, mobile, and cloud concurrently.
Don't forget he's talking in a different language that has very different meanings as well when he's trying to cross-translate that into English for us to understand. Well, there's a big cultural barrier that needs to be climbed over to get that interpretation correct as well.
Yeah, I mean, the interview he's talking about, Yoshida was talking in English, but yeah, I completely agree that Yoshida's not a native English speaker, so he's doing the best translation in his own head and conveying it. In general, I agree with that articulation of what he said, but again, to me, it's a jump to make the interpretation that he's saying a game is going to come out on all 3 of those platforms, and it's going to be the same game at parity, and it's going to come out on the same date.
Survey, we know what the word ubiquitous means. You don't have to give us the definition. we know what it means. Oh my goodness. What was I going to say?
Collect your thoughts, take a breath, move forward.
No, it's just funny. I'm like, now we're getting definitions for words. But
you really have descended to the bottom of the barrel in this conversation, then, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. Maybe I'll take Forte's advice. But
that's what. Hey, listen, man. Forte know what he's talking about every once in a while.
Hey, how's your brother doing, Forte?
So it's like telling me the definition was gonna get me to make a different statement that I'd already said 3 times, right?
Oh, you said he's saying it was for Jeff. I mean, I
okay, gotcha. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. You never know, Severin. Some people have actually given us see, look at this, the definition. People have done that to us before.
Yeah, I apologize about that. I will walk that back.
Yeah, but no, thank you, Severin. That's a great question, though, Severin. I forgot what I was going to say about
Forte's brother.
No, not Forte's brother. Forte's brother's wonderful, by the way.
Oh Lord!
How about Forte Series S? Forte Digital Edition.
Oh man! Shout out to my little brother.
I like how you say little brother, not my brother, but little brother.
He is my little brother.
You got to put that flex on him, man.
I got to. That's like the only thing I got on him right now.
Nah, Forte, you got a lot on him, man.
I know. He's
a little more serious, I think. No,
he's very much more serious.
Yeah, I like your like you tend to be a little more. I don't know, not as you're serious, but you're not. Oh, he seems like he's very serious.
Oh yeah, I mean, when you work for multi-billion-dollar companies and stuff, and you are in charge of making sure that shit runs sales in the right direction, you're gonna kind of be that way.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Hey, I was gonna ask you a question for it. I meant to ask you. I'm glad you made it on the show because I was gonna ask this one question. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. What are you seeing in terms of fan reaction at your store? Are you seeing a lot of pre-order? Do you see a lot of pre-orders? A lot of phone calls coming in today? Hey, is it coming in? What are you seeing?
Well, everybody. First of all, people have been trying to get the deluxe edition for the last 3 weeks, and it's been sold out pretty much everywhere. So mostly just a lot of anticipation of the game coming out. For the most part, I think we probably did. We did we did a lot of pre-orders this week on it. Of course, always the week leading up to the game is always going to be when you get the most of your pre-orders and stuff. But for the most part, everybody was asking if there was going to be midnights for it tonight. Unfortunately, there wasn't because of the fact that Square didn't want to let it go at midnight. They wanted either to be a digital release at midnight, and sometimes corporations or publishers do that. Sometimes you get the physical release will come out earlier than the digital one, but I guess maybe it might be a Sony thing where Sony wants the digital version to be the only version that's really out there in mass droves, so they could kind of sell off the PlayStation Store. So kind of get people to want to say, I don't want to wait till the morning, I'll just buy it. So that definitely is a tactic that works. So yep, it's not coming out for us until tomorrow when we open, but. That deluxe copy, and this is the thing about when we talk about people and what they're willing to spend money on. Games cost $70 right now, but the majority of the copies of Final Fantasy I got pre-ordered are all digital. Are all the deluxe ones. And guess how much the deluxe one costs? $100. So
wow.
Hey Forte, what are you gonna do now that consoles are over and exclusives are on their last run? It seems like GameStop is just going to have to shrivel up. I don't know. Are there corporate discussions going on about converting them to Walmart outlets?
Oh Lord, who knows what they're doing, man? I don't get paid to even think about that stuff. All I know is, right now, this is where we're sitting at, and where we're going to be in the future. Who really knows when it comes to with digital distribution? It could be anything at this point. I do think it's going to be a while, especially since especially in my situation, we are more a Nintendo store than anything, and Nintendo is going to be the very last one that's going to do anything when it comes to an all digital future. I think the one thing that people don't realize is I do think these manufacturers like to see the resale of their their consoles and stuff being sought after like that. Like, as much as it sucked that PlayStation didn't have enough systems out there for people to buy over the last couple of years, up until the last 12 months, they had a lot, but before that, it was very hard to find. But not being available, and even if people were buying them on the third market, from scalpers and stuff, that still made Sony look even greater. It made their system more sought after because people couldn't find it. So they would just either wait for a scalper to give it to them for a cheaper price, or they would just wait for PlayStation to finally, put out one for them to get. So it keeps the interest there, even if it's like something that they can't find with the price being as high. And Nintendo never dropping their price on anything, it kind of keeps the value of all their properties and all of their hardware at its peak value and stuff. So I think especially when it comes to Nintendo, you're going to see them be the last ones to do it because they like that type of infrastructure where, it's still value tied to all the things that you buy from them. Xbox, I think, is just a lost cause at this point. It's a wrap. It's, at some point, Xbox is just going to become whatever Xbox wants to become. And then PlayStation you won't see anything with PlayStation until the reliance on the box becomes way less than what it is now. Because like Falky said earlier, there is a lot of different things that's tied to the ecosystem around that box. Not just the fact that they make the box, but controller purchases, the 30% that they make off of every transaction made by third party on there, the fact that they save on when it comes to developing, when they make for their own particular platform instead of making for PC and stuff or doing it later. When it comes to parallel development, it's a lot cheaper to do it on your own platform first instead of trying to do it in both places. So yeah, are you going to sacrifice a little short term for a little bit long term games later on because they can still sell those things later? Yeah, but overall, they're making more money than they've ever made when it comes to this. It just doesn't look that way due to all the stuff that's going on in the world because gaming was so ballooned over the course of the last 2 years. It's starting to finally come back to its resting place. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. But I do think physical is going to still be a part of the future. It just comes down to how much of a part it's going to be and for how much longer.
Hey, Forte, are you selling PlayStation 5s for to people who are buying it for the first time so they can play Final Fantasy?
Actually, I sold a couple of them. I had, I think, 2 people this week that bought PlayStations for Final Fantasy, and those were staunch PC people. One of them, I knew they was going to do it because they were waiting for the announcement to see if it was coming to PC.
What were they?
They were PC gamers, and one of them, it was funny, and I know them personally. They were hoping, because they saw the way that PlayStation was going when it came to like putting games on PC like a couple years ago, especially when they started putting God of War and Horizon on there. And then when they put Spider-Man on there, they was like, oh yeah, it's a good chance we might get Final Fantasy day and date on PC. And I was like, don't know about that. And then when that direct came out, when that State of Play came out and they talked about it and they put up that splash screen saying 3 months basically, that's when they made the decision to say, yep, I'm just going to buy a PlayStation because they didn't want to wait.
Well, all I know, man, is there's been a lot of pony and Xbot heat up here on this podcast tonight. I'm team Tencent. So
ain't they losing a lot of money too, though?
Hey, look, no. They had a little PR gaffe in December. They recovered from that. They make $32 billion in revenue. They put the smackdown on both Xbox and Sony. We don't even want to hear. You ain't heard about Tencent layoffs. Tencent has it figured out. They're skating to the future. They're already where Xbox and PlayStation are going to have to go.
Oh my god!
I don't even know what all this support is for all these Western game content companies.
There you go.
Stuff on other screens, single player. Look, Tencent is where it's at.
Is this a heel turn?
I can't wait to see the name of the auditing company that signed off on that set of accounts.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, who signed off on that?
Yeah, I'm as people know, I'm team Nvidia, so I'll just leave it at that.
Oh man, this is nuts.
We're now valued we're valued team Nvidia is worth a lot of money now.
Hey, Chris in the chat says Tencent doesn't have any hardware. That's the point, Chris. All you guys are hung up on hardware. the future of gaming is just software.
Hey,
Sarah Bond said games are the platform now.
Up until, okay, so I don't see the recent numbers, but remember coming into this generation, what platform was the highest grossing platform in overall sales in gaming? It doesn't even own hardware. It doesn't even sell games. It was Apple.
It's BRAP music. Yeah, there's
Apple and Google were up there. They were third and fourth, I think.
Yeah, think about that. They don't even make games, and they were like third and fourth in gaming.
Yep. And this is why I think it's a little questionable. I might say crazy when people insist that like part of the success of the Xbox strategy is going to be right getting its games on mobile. I mean, to me, those people have definitely not looked at the what is it? I can't remember what that just passed over in the EU. Not the Digital Rights Act, but the DMA, I think it's called. But not just that, but like that forced Apple to allow for people to have their own app stores outside the App Store. But they haven't looked at the draconian revenue parity clause that's in that says Apple gets 50 euro cents for every user over 1 million that you have every year. And that if you're selling that, if you're distributing that app in your own app store, then they get that, and you don't get the 1 million user baseline discount, right? So if you just have the app available outside the app store, then you get charged, right, for every user over 1 million. But if you're running your own app store, distributing multiple apps, then you get hit for every single user that you have once you cross the 1 million mark every year. So the first year, so the first year you pay, for 500,000 users, 50 euro cents. But if the next year you're at 1.7 million users, you pay for 700,000 of them. And if you're running your own app store, you pay for 1.7 million of them. So, I mean, people are going to be, at that point, it only makes sense to do that type of operation if you're running it at incredibly large scale. And you're making enough revenue to compensate for what you're going to have to give Apple. I mean, so basically, if you're trying to do an end run around Apple to get away from the 30% clause, you're still going to wind up paying out of hide, right, to run your own operation. I mean, that's the uphill battle that Xbox is going to be against, right? So.
Did you see that? I shared an article with you, Logic, from mobilegamer.biz. Inside Apple Arcade, Axe Games declining payouts, Delusion Studios, and an uncertain future.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, interesting read. But all right, I do need to get going here. It is getting close to midnight, and I want to thank everyone in the live chat for hanging out with us this evening. Really appreciate it. I want to give a big shout out to our guest, David Faulkner, Falky, who's live with us from the other side of planet Earth, literally on the other side.
Yep.
You're like a 26
hour flight
from
you as we can get, actually.
Yeah.
Almost as far away as possible without leaving the planet.
You're probably, Falky, you're probably like, thank God I'm away from these crazy Americans that argue over plastic boxes.
I'm not going to comment.
You don't disagree. It's great. It's great. But no, Falky, always a pleasure having you on. If you want to be found, Falky, let everyone know where they can find you. By the way, Falky, I was thinking about this the other day. I was first introduced to you by Optimus Code.
Yes.
Yeah, and I remember because you did a Spaces with him.
Yep.
I'll never forget that.
It upset a lot of people.
Oh, I remember that. It was about Game Pass. Yeah, I'll never forget that. Yeah.
How's that going for people these days? Is it any better?
Well, I mean, you know what you said a couple years ago. I mean, you were really you weren't off the mark per se. So.
No. So yes, but thoughts with Optimus's family. That anniversary will be coming around soon. Such a shame that he's no longer with us. But larger than life character whose his drive and passion was to educate people. So hopefully we've done a little bit of that today.
Yeah. And speaking about you mentioned his drive to educate people about the gaming industry. I think one of the unfortunate things I saw with that is that people, when he said things that they didn't like, they kind of turned on him, unfortunately. And he kind of had a heel turn, Logic. he kind of had enough at one point.
Yeah, but I'm putting in my order for 10-cent t-shirts right now.
But are you allowed to do that? Are Americans allowed to talk to Chinese at the moment, or are you guys still on no talking terms?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can't.
Yeah, I was gonna say Logic probably can't, and maybe Slimo. Yeah, I can.
But hey, we're all buddies at the moment. Apparently, they're going to lift all their tariffs, and we're going to be able to sell them wine without tariffs again next week. So it'll be all good.
There you go.
Nice. So one thing I just want to piggyback on Falky's statement, just because tonight was so heated and turgid at some points. So just a reminder that on the show, I mean, at least from my perspective, no matter how passionate we might be about something, and no matter how much I will admit, have a disregard for disingenuous arguments and dishonest statements and things of that nature. At the end of the day, the point of this show, and in fact, I was even supposed to be off tonight, so I wasn't even supposed to be here. But the point of a lot of the things that we say for the show isn't to assert to you that we are absolutely correct and can't be questioned. Quite frankly, I don't really care if you believe me or not. The point is to give you data points and to give you information so that you would hopefully take that and go Google it, go do your own research, go plow through past articles, look through the history of the industry, and arrive at your own conclusion. A lot of the argumentative points tonight were about taking what CEOs and C-suite people say at face value, and I will tell you from my own personal perspective, CEOs say things and they don't necessarily mean what they say. And so hopefully what would happen is if you're studying an industry and studying a market is for you to eventually obtain enough knowledge so that you can put what they say through the smell test and determine if what they're saying equates to what they actually mean. Quite frankly, I've been around a lot of board meetings. What you really need to start paying attention to is what they don't say, because often that is the real tell of where things are going. Let's not forget that there are things like a Nintendo CEO will say, hey, new hardware is not coming, and then new Nintendo hardware will show up the next month. So I don't personally believe that the game is, watching these things and taking what people say at face value and coming away with a literal interpretation of it. I actually think you listen to what they say, put what they say through some type of rubric of logic, of reasoning on your own, and then come out the other side of that with how you interpret it, supported by a basis of rationale and data points and bullets that you can actually speak to and articulate why you feel or why you perceive things the way that you do.
Yeah, it's a great point, Logic. There's one person that I trust 100% of the time. That's Falky. And I'll just leave it at that. This man doesn't tell a lie.
I feel attacked.
Falky. Yeah, I don't know if you want to be found, Falky, but yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say I appreciate the kind words, but I don't know how to respond to that. I just try to help people understand in simple terms that all the double talk and all the other crap that goes on out there is just cut through the bullshit and let's get down to the facts of it. So, where can you find me? You can find me enjoying a lovely afternoon at the bottom end of the eastern side of Australia at the moment. Slumming around on Twitter at Forky87, hanging out with you fine gentlemen. Yeah, if you need questions, queries, or comments about the show or what we spoke about, hit me up and I'm happy to talk to you about it.
Yeah, Falky's a great resource, by the way. Really is. I mean, I love talking numbers with him and getting his thoughts on the trends in the gaming industry. Just super insightful. So thank you again, Falky, for joining us. Really appreciate the time, as always. And then Gaming Forte, you have a show tomorrow. Your show, DPS Podcast, tomorrow night, 9 p.m.
Yes, sir. It's going to be a lot to talk about, man. There's a lot of stuff happened over the week. Shout out to the 10%ers and shout out to the community. It's going to be tomorrow night, 9 p.m. With Slow-Mo Backslap on my channel. Come check us out. Going to be a great time. And check out my YouTube channel, Gaming Forte. I've been putting up a couple of videos. Talked about some Xbox stuff with the exclusivity. Talked about PlayStation and the layoffs yesterday. So really appreciate all the support around that. Other than that, you guys have a great day. We see you tomorrow, or we see you guys next week.
Awesome. And Logic, if you want to be found, let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can catch me Sunday nights at 8:45 p.m. on the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. You can see me periodically guesting on other podcasts, such as Damage Per Second, as was just mentioned. I'll be there tomorrow night. I will also be on the Gaming Circle podcast Saturday morning. And then I do my own show, a solo cast, Tuesday nights. I don't have a specific time for that just yet, but it does go Tuesday nights on my channel, Rounding Off Infinity. That is talking about games where I do a deep dive, talking about the financial, historical, and technical matters underneath a lot of the things that are in the gaming news cycle and gaming zeitgeist. Really try and hit those things at a much deeper level of detail than you will typically see covered in, articles and posts on gaming news sites. So, talked last time about Sony's new passkey for the PlayStation, and talked about the security and convenience elements of that for users. Talked about Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League failing to meet Warner Brothers' financial expectations and what to expect out of WBIE and WBD. And also talked about Battlefield game director Marcus Leto leaving EA and Ridgeline Games and what that might mean for the future of the franchise.
Awesome. No, thank you, Logic. And then B Money. I know I ask you every week where you want to be found, but I think it's pretty easy to find you. If you want to remind these kind people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me everywhere. The same name, B Money 101. I have a lot of great conversations on Twitter these last couple of days. So, if you want to find me there, jump in a conversation. Lot of great people speaking and actually having a good conversation. So, very surprised of the interaction that I've had on Twitter the last couple of days. But other than that, man, a lot of great games coming down the pipeline. I want to shout out Unicorn Overload. That's going to be probably the next game I pick up after Final Fantasy tomorrow. So it's a real nice tactical RPG. There's a demo out for it on just about every platform, I believe. So if you're into tactical RPGs, definitely check that out. It's pretty dope. I like some of the things they have in the game. A lot of different concepts kind of rolled into one. So if you're in tactical RPGs, definitely check that out.
No doubt. Thank you, B Money. Yeah, there are a lot of great games coming out. And thank you everyone again. Please hit that like button if you haven't done so. It helps the channel. If you're new, subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you're alerted when we go live. And who knows, maybe there's a BRAP rant later this week. But don't count on YouTube to alert you when I rant. Give me a follow on Twitter at BRAP_podcast. Until then, thank you everyone. We'll see you next time.